Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. If you guys want to move your seats more in, I don't know why they set the chairs up that way, so if you want to move them more in closer you can see. The idea was not to put you on the side like that, so move your chairs in so you can be more visible for us. And there will be a time for public comment later in the meeting, so we'll allow for that. But move your chairs in more so it's more of a, you can all watch us. Deliberate.
We can watch you.
Yeah. So maybe just to help get this thing started, we'll do introductions first, and I'm going to frame the discussion for today, then we're going to turn it over to Mark to lead the agenda for the day. So let's go around at the council level. Let's start with Aubrey and go around. So
Aubrey Clark with Intel Corporation.
Thompson Morrison with Fuse Insight.
Lisa Graham with Black Canyon Woodworks.
Eric Meslow, TimberCon.
Mark Lewis, OEIB.
Jim Pyro, Portland General.
Dwayne Johnson, Go Up Free Ventures.
Herb Fricky, Cooper Zeets Engineers.
And who do we have on the phone?
Is Fred on the phone? Fred, are you on the phone? Not yet.
Not yet,
Okay.
so we hope to have Fred on the phone. And maybe just for us, maybe just go quickly around and introduce yourself who's in the public and who you represent. So we'll start with Kyle.
I'm Kyle Richino with the Oregon Business Council. Melissa Dubois with the South Metro Salem STEM Partnership.
I'm Craig Arnson with Portland General Electric.
My name is Luis Juarez, Community Colleges and Workforce Development.
Laura Roach, Department of Education.
Joe Oshiro, Oregon University System.
Donna Cohen, former technology educator.
Great.
Jamie Rovich, Oregon Department of Education.
Doug Wilson, Legislative Fiscal Office.
Great.
Laura McKinney, ETIC, and Rivas. Maureen Paul, PGE. Kimberly Howard, Education.
Seth Allen, staff, organization investment.
Okay. Thank you all. Thanks for, and I'm sure others will come in. As I said, we'll have a time at the end of the agenda for public comments. So if you have something you want to note as we go through the conversation, note it down and you can give us that during the public comment period. So just to remind people, and it's always good to kind of remind where we've been and where we're going. As you recall, our charter is a couple things. Is to, and maybe I just want to read this so it's clear. The council is established for the purpose of assisting the chief education officer in developing and overseeing a long-term strategy to meet the following educational goals by 2025 related to science, technology, engineering, math. Double the percentage of students in 4th and 8th grade who are proficient in advanced in mathematics or science, and then double the number of students who earn a post-secondary degree requiring proficiency in STEM fields. So again, that's the high level. We obviously can go farther than that, but that was our charter. To accomplish that, we've had a number of meetings over the last 6 months. Started in November here at PGE's meeting. Then we had a meeting in Salem. In January, February, we met in Corvallis. March at the Gorge. April, we had the summit. In May, we met in Salem to start talking about strategies. So we've spent a lot of time educating ourselves on what's going on, what's good is going on. The next step in the process is to develop recommendations, which is what today is all about. And I really want to appreciate and thank Mark for the work he did to bring this together. And I think he's put together an agenda for us today that can help us kind of sort through these issues. I think the pictorial he put together is just a great way to think about where we're going, but I'm going to let Mark try to explain that. So, you laugh.
That's right.
A pure STEM. This is taking the A in STEAM, right?
That's right.
The arts
Well,
part. Before we get started, any comments by the council before we get started? Thoughts? Okay, Mark, I'm going to turn to you to help lead this discussion.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I did have a question. I noticed that many of the people in the room are from PG&E or PGE, so I'm wondering if you're stacking it for some particular reason.
We're going to vote. When I'm interested, other people get interested, you know?
Absolutely. When what E.F. Hutton says. Well, thank you for that. I think one thing that I just want to make clear. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for the input that you provided at the last council meeting and before. I mean, we took a lot of public input throughout the last 8 months from people representing various aspects of the broader education system and beyond the formal education system. We then, which led us to our April STEM Summit, in which we got a lot clearer about some of the recommendations, specific recommendations that people had to address many of the barriers in the system. And then this last meeting, we tried to sort of aggregate those into a more coherent whole. And so what I've done is take what I heard and try to separate things out from what are some of those systemic agency asks that we've got, other things that the system needs to do to address the barriers, and what are some of those things that I believe fall into the purview of the council. And we can be working on both simultaneously, but our purpose of the council here right now is really to drive recommendations to the OEIB and the Chief Education Officer for possible inclusion in the governor's budget. So I just want to be clear that we're not creating a strategic plan right now. That is something that we are tasked with doing, and we need to do it, and it needs to be a lot more comprehensive, and we need to get much more particular about some of the data that exists and doesn't exist, and there's a lot of work to do in order to create that, including creating a more formalized advisory group with the various sectors represented, so that they can have, that we can rely on them and their input and communication with their own constituency. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, while at the same time knowing that there's a great deal of urgency around this work. We are frankly overproducing an underprepared workforce and members of today's society, and we have to take steps immediately to try to address those issues. And some of those steps are around building capacity within the system, as we saw at the last council meeting, and some of those are directly targeting sort of short-term gains as well as investing in long-term gains. So it's not an easy task. It's how do we take this big, hairy, complex system and say, okay, well, what is within our purview and control, and how can we incent those things for immediate outcomes as well as the long-term outcomes? And I tried to do that then in these three sort of broader budgetary recommendations. Some themes that you'll see across these is that it's taking a continuum approach. We're addressing the entire continuum here. We're, or at least attending to mechanisms that should address the entire continuum from early learning through to the workforce. We are trying to build capacity for sustainability and impact over the long term. I think it's really critical to note that our implementation structures within the state are very limited. So when we have something like a Common Core or Next Generation Science Standards, the ability to actually say from a policy perspective and get those policies to actually impact what's happening in a classroom in the field or in an out-of-school program out in the field is very, very limited right now. There's huge barriers. We have pockets of excellence, but we don't have that systemic coherence and implementation network for us to spread the effective practices to reach more students and have greater impact. Equity is one of those themes that should be clearly represented in this, and if it's not clearly represented into these three strategies yet, then we need to rectify that. The idea that we're trying to empower local communities to create local solutions to local needs within a larger state framework of specific outcomes is another theme that should be seen throughout this. That idea that we are targeting to specific metrics and be outcome oriented, whether or not we know how to measure some of those outcomes yet, should be a part of this as well. We need to get very specific about the data and the outcomes that we're seeking. And then, as I said, another theme is attending to both short-term and long-term. What I'd like to do is engage us in three sets of conversations today. The first one is to get immediate sort of response, questions, things that come up with how are these three strategies interacting, our purpose is clear, etc., in a sort of a general, broad stance. Is this adequate right now? Is it overly focused? Is it not focused enough? I mean, so should we be putting a stake in the ground, say around mathematics or something else? Then I'd like us to then break into groups, and I'd like the audience to do this as well in groups, around each of the 3 strategies and do a deeper dive. And I sent out last night, and I have in your packets some focus questions that are going to enable me to do the next iteration. So this is my selfishness here. But what would the Chief Education Officer and what the OEIB and the Subcommittee of Outcomes and Investments are going to be wanting is to see answers to these kinds of questions, okay? And that black bar was actually the OEIB logo that didn't show up at Kinko's when I printed it, so I don't know why. It wasn't racy or anything. So it looks like it's redacted. So there's 2 things. One around the OEIB strategic framework and how that all fits, and then the other is specifically around the equity lens and to apply the equity lens to each of these. So what we'll do is then after our general discussion, we'll break into 3 groups around each of the strategies and engage in conversations around both of those. Some of those questions are redundant across them, okay, just to let you know, because some of the equity lens questions actually come up in the outcomes and investment template. Questions on what we're doing today or what the purpose of today is?
Okay. Maybe
Yeah.
just a little bit on outcomes. Where do we need to be?
Outcomes,
Yeah.
in terms of...
These recommendations, and when do we have to have them completed, when it's going to be presented, just to get people framed.
It's going to be presented July 24th. So I would like to collect as much input today as possible and get that back out to you. I need to create a no more than 8-page document in PowerPoint for the outcomes and investments folks. I'd like to do at least 2 iterations with you and get you a draft within, say, 15 days by the end of the month for the first draft out of this. After you provide me some input, and then do a quick iteration by distance, and we'll need to decide whether or not we would like to gather together as a whole for another conversation before that presentation or not. I think we can do it. I know July is a time when many people travel, July and August, so we can talk about the need to actually be present as a quorum for anything. But I think we can do much of it via distance, via technology, Google Docs, or something like that. Okay.
Great.
Is
So that's
July
what we got.
4 a formal testimony?
July 24th is a formal presentation to the subcommittee of the OEIB, the Outcomes and Investment Subcommittee. And what they're, just to let you know what guidance we've received from them, is that we're not putting dollar amounts in front of them. I think that's really frustrating for particularly for the business folks on that, because you're saying, well, I can agree to almost anything that's just feel good, right? You say, wow, well, of course, why not? Well, if that's, $500 million, then I might have a different viewpoint on that. How do we balance the return on the investment? I think that's a really critical piece of this is in terms of return on investment, specific return on investment for these recommendations, as well as what would happen if we didn't do this. What are the costs associated for Oregon if we didn't move forward with something like this? That, I think, is something that we'd like to articulate as well.
So when does the price get put to the strategy?
Yeah, well, I've done some very rough figures, sort of that hand-waving piece that we can, talk about a little bit today if you'd like. But those numbers then would be part of the governor's budget process that is being undertaken with in partnership with the OEIB.
So maybe as we go through each of these strategies, just give us I know it's risky, but give us a ballpark of what we're talking about, because I think it puts it in context as we think about how big this is and how large it is. So.
Sure.
Okay, so we got a work plan. You guys ready to go? Ready to dig into this? So
Yes.
we'll go strategy by strategy, kind of give us a sense of what's there, and we'll just kind of high-level summary, and then we'll see if we got any input from the council. to
Yeah,
start with.
well, why don't we do that? Okay, so the first one around the statewide STEM network is really this idea of local change, right? This is a capacity building network that actually can guide those local solutions to local needs. The idea here is very similar to regional achievement collaboratives, to early learning hubs, etc. Should those be aligned over time? Absolutely. And I've been talking with Whitney Grubbs and the folks who are part of the regional achievement collaboratives. We need to align those over time. Right now, we just need to get to work. So I think what we don't want to do is create additional work for communities that already have collaborations going. So in some places, this makes total sense to align right now. In other communities, it's going to take a lot more time to align those efforts. Two aspects of this. One is financial support for the coordination, on-the-ground coordination for those partnerships, for the hubs. The number of hubs is totally, I'm just estimating 10 to 12 hubs. We have 6 now. That's an estimation from the level of interest that I've heard from the field. That's where that comes from, that number. It's made up, but based on input. The idea of those hubs is really, again, those cross-sector partnerships, and they're not implementing programs themselves necessarily, but they're aligning funding and decisions for and support for those programs. Does that make sense? That difference? That's the intent of the STEM hubs. Are we there with the STEM hubs? No. In order to make sure that those STEM hubs are effective and that they actually behave like a network, we have to put additional energy and support into those. So how do you spread best practices from one hub to another? Ideally, that would be organic. In reality, all networks need energy to sustain them. And so there needs to be support across these hubs for some communications and advocacy work. So how do we implement policy there? How do we drive data and provide evaluation frameworks to drive the outcomes of those hubs? And then how do we look at equitable sharing of resources across the different regions in the state? Okay, some regions have greater access to private investment than others. And so private investment in terms of dollars, I think that the human capital should be part of that equation as well. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions or if this is a
price tag for this one, you think?
Price tag? Well, I've gone back and forth. So if we're talking about simply the backbone, the organizational aspects, we're talking a much lower number than if we incorporate programming into this as well. But less than $5 million is what I would say.
Annual?
For the biennium.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you envisioning the infrastructure that you just described, in other words, the communications, the data systems, etc., residing in the hubs themselves? Will it be a separate organization or structure that houses that? How do you see that evolving?
I don't see a huge centralized support system. Okay, there's other efforts going on. For example, the longitudinal database. Mm-hmm. So that's moving forward. That needs to be a part of the infrastructure support. So what we want to do is make sure that there are ways for the hubs to access these things. It's more of focus and convening and interacting across the hub. So I'm thinking 1.5 FTE from a centralized perspective in support of the hubs. So it's a pretty small
Would that centralized be at the state? Would it be at a hub? Could it be somewhere
So
else?
each of the hubs is probably going to need about, I would say, 1.5 to 2 FTE to support coordination, communication, etc. From a pure staffing perspective. And I think that what we see nationally is we see these kinds of models nationally too that are working very effectively for that. Now, if the hubs has additional, if their role is broader than just that coordination piece and alignment and communication across these various constituencies, if it's actually delivering programs and doing additional work, then that number is going to be higher. But we also have to expect that each of the hubs would bring forward matching funds and support from their local constituents, okay, to support those regional efforts. It's not going to be fully funded from a state perspective. I don't think that's a good idea at all.
Okay, so I didn't quite answer the question I was looking for, which is,
Okay.
I was asking a strategic question.
Okay.
So for example, you may have one hub that actually is doing a lot of the pedagogy that could be done for everybody,
Sure.
okay, and they may be very good at that.
Yeah.
And would the strategy then be to say, why don't you let those folks focus on that and then come up with a model for sharing it across the hubs, in which case the hubs themselves own that? Or we're actually looking at a different model where there is a centralized or at least a more centralized vehicle for distributing things out to the rest of the network. Each of those models have an advantage and a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if there's any thought being put into that as a preference, or is that something we're going to decide down the line?
I think it's a mixed answer.
Yeah.
In actuality. Different hubs have a little bit different focuses. Some have been operational for a long time. Some have shown some promising models. We would be very interested, I think, in trying to spread those things and not recreating stuff throughout. And yet, at this point, I would be hesitant to say, chasing the silver bullet and saying, oh, well, that hub has, that PD model is the model, because I haven't seen that yet. So I think what we want to do is create the communication structures across all of those hubs to ensure people are sharing those ideas. What makes effective professional development and professional learning? How are we working with our industry partners effectively? What sort of preparation is necessary when we're bringing in, from an educator perspective as well as from an industry professional perspective, to work with kids? How do you make that most effective? What sort of support ahead of time needs to happen to make those interactions as effective as possible? Those are the kinds of things that a hub can do, and those are the kinds of ideas that should be spread across them. So when people say a model, I guess I'm skeptical, because I haven't seen. We've chased in education this idea of replicating models in terms of scalability. It's spreadability.
Okay,
what
so-
worked in one place doesn't necessarily wholesale work in
But
another.
I wasn't thinking of coming with a solution out of one place, but I'm thinking with the dollars and cents here, right?
Yeah.
So if each of the hubs then decides they're going to go develop their own method of rolling things out, then it gets really expensive, as opposed to saying, okay, well, we're going to let those folks over there iterate 5 times with everybody connecting with them and see what comes out of that. So we
Sure.
can actually get the maximum impact of our dollars and cents being.
Sure. Where there's economies of scale to do that, absolutely. I think people are going to have some great ideas around metrics. The idea is to create a learning network that actually discusses those ideas. What are our critical questions? What are our barriers? Let's bust them down. You're going to try it this way. You're going to try it this way. Okay, which worked best? And while attending to some common metrics.
So just like we did on the second day of the STEM Summit, bringing the hubs together, sharing what they're
Right.
learning, and hopefully create this community of learning. So
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So yes, Dwayne, I think is what, yeah, where there's
All
economies
the
of
above.
scale, I wouldn't want to. No, I think we have to be as frugal as possible in this too. I think we want to be lean, very lean.
Well, there's a lot of pressure in Salem right now on ESDs and the perceptions of what they've become over the years of these individual fiefdoms doing their own thing, being very expensive to execute on a mission as opposed to a centralized focus on it. So I
Yeah.
know that would be a third rail if we start putting something together that looks like that.
Yeah, I would be concerned about that as well. I think part of the centralized support is also that oversight so that you're attending to those metrics and you're attending to the outcomes and you're providing, in some places you're going to say, challenging the hubs themselves to say, do you have the right people at the table, the right leadership? How are these things going? Are you being effective? Where's the strength in your partnership? How much private dollars have you leveraged in support for this? How are you working with your early learning people? To me, that centralized support is both a hug and a push. So you hug them in terms of, wow, some great stuff here. Let's help spread that. Let's make connections. But also, holding them very, very much accountable in a supportive fashion. So.
Other questions on the strategy? People generally think it's the right direction, wrong direction?
I could see if private funding, though, they're going to want to push it to their advantage, though, or their goals first. Get that agreement that, okay, we're going to centralize or share something. This has to be done up front.
Yeah. So one of
industry that's putting their money in.
Sure. One of the biggest, I think, the most critical questions is I've seen the development of hubs in a lot of different stages in a couple of different states, right? And I think there are some big, everybody can agree to the vision, okay? That's not a problem usually. It's the aligning action and the metrics. What are we holding ourselves accountable for is a really hard conversation for many people to have, and that's really appropriate for industry and educators and out-of-school providers and policymakers to be coming together around that conversation, around the data that exists and the data that we want to get as well. The really tough conversation actually comes into play when it's about allocation of resources. Because what it requires is, in this model ideally, is people start aligning their programming and their existing dollars to those outcomes, okay, in those regions. And that's a tougher conversation to have, okay?
I would add, as a business funder, specifically for one of the old STEM hubs, I think what we've struggled with, and I point to Melissa because she was leading the efforts when we first started this, is really aligning all the groups that are involved, like to your point, Mark, on what the outcomes are, and like school district A is doing this, and this, and really holding them accountable. But I think education to the businesses is also necessary, because I would go back to our foundation, for instance, or our corporate dollars, and have these conversations of, are we asking, for the right outcomes just for our reporting basis? So I mean, I think it would help us too to educate the businesses and really getting everybody in alignment. To our conversation the other day about potential larger foundation funding too, when you get all the businesses and additional funders on the right page, or at least aligned. Yeah. I think it'll roll easier instead of I'm out for myself, but really opening them up to make changes in how their reporting processes work.
Yeah, and I think industry, rightfully so, are looking for trusted partners. In Washington, they were very suspicious about investing in a K-12 education system, seeing that, billions of dollars being spent and them paying taxes, and what's the return on that investment, and if we're going to be investing, how do we know that we're going to see a return? And so what I would, through this, is the idea is to be a trusted partner that holds each of these investments accountable.
So the question I have in this strategy, I generally like the direction, but I'm not sure I still understand how the STEM networks interface with the educational system. I mean, it seems like we've created this whole new place to think of great ideas and try things out and maybe even provide money to fund programs. But how does that get merged into the education? Because we can't replace that education. It's there. We've got to use it. And I'm not sure how the hubs influence or cause change, especially in multi-jurisdictional educational systems.
Right.
I can see how they can influence the third-party programs, the outside providers, in terms of that. But I'm not sure how they do the education. So have you thought about how that happens?
Yeah, actually, the K-12 partners, post-secondary partners. So in general, what we've put forward and through the Department of Education on the regional STEM hub grants currently requires partnerships from K-12, from business and industry, from the post-secondary space, from out-of-school youth, sort of youth-serving organizations in STEM, which are those extended learning opportunities, and then economic and workforce development. So those partnerships have to be part of the governance of this in order to align that programming and to directly impact both the formal and the informal education sectors.
But how do you then make it systemic through the education? You could do one school, one partnership to try something out. How does it get systemic to the whole education system? How do you take it from just the small idea within that system? Because you might only partner with a school on a K through 12 program to do some things, to try some things out. I think about it, maybe I got it wrong. But then how do you get that whole school system changed to adopt those kinds of good practices? Is just hope? Is it hope, or is it?
No, in the places where it's working well, what you have is you have superintendents and curriculum directors at the table, saying, "Look, here's what we need, and is how it's going to roll out." It's not one school. We're talking districts. We're talking districts and commitments to this kind of an approach, and saying, "Okay, let's solve this together." That's when it's working well.
Okay, so the superintendents need to have a seat at the table because they're the ones that could change.
Yeah, and when they don't have a seat at the table, if they're not showing up, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be systemic. So for me, as an indicator of a health of a hub, as we review these STEM hub grants and whether they're being effective or not, if that leadership is not at the table, it's not getting done.
Okay. That's important.
Right?
So
that's an important piece to note. Yeah.
So further to Jim's point, Mark, just a question. When I look at the outcomes then
Yeah.
for STEM network, and I see increased teacher effectiveness in STEM, and I see implementing new math and science standards, is it the work of the council here to try to figure out really the logistics of how that can happen to become a measurable, or is that something that's taken on by an outside group? We just make the recommendation that this is the kind of outcome we want to see.
So that's a great question. So one of the things that is happening parallel to our conversation right now is the management of the regional STEM hub grants and the CTE, STEM grants, and the STEM schools grants. One piece of that is that we're currently writing an RFP for the Eastern to create an evaluation framework for the regional STEM hub grants, the Eastern Promise grants, and the regional achievement collaboratives. What we'd like to do is co-construct that evaluation framework and those metrics with the hubs themselves so that they're able to, just like they're trying to do at a local level, what are the metrics that we can commit to that are proximal enough to our work that we can use those effectively to say whether or not we're doing a good job, and then making sure that those get tied to the OEIB's larger metrics for the whole system, right, in the 40-40-20. So that piece is going on right now and will be, over the next couple of months being developed. So each of these, as we look at additional investments in hubs, that evaluation framework would drive all of that work.
So we could incorporate those kinds of requirements then into wherever funding, let's say hypothetically, would get.
Yeah, the idea is to move to a lot more outcomes-oriented investments where you're not trying to micromanage this, that you've built capacity that is deserving a lot more of a lot more discretion in how the dollars get spent, but also adhering to very strong accountability metrics as well. So that's the idea, right? That's where we're heading with it.
Yep.
So, but great questions, because we're not there yet, right? So it's keeping that end goal in mind and building the necessary supports to get there. And one of the things that Jamie Rummage and the folks at the Department of Education, myself, we're making individual visits to communities in order to assess where they are and how it's going, and do you have the right leadership at the table, and what can we do to hug and push. right? So the hug is the educator in me. The push is the business guy in me.
A quick question on the outcomes for the statewide STEM network.
Uh-huh.
Outcomes number 1 and number 4, increasing student achievement scores and effectively implement new math and science standards.
Yeah.
I was having a hard time finding something above that that really delivers on that. So,
Great. So with, if you're looking at the bullets under A there, so a couple of challenges here, and again, you're going to hear just my take on this. In terms of teacher professional development, teacher professional learning, in order to implement the Common Core and next generation science standards effectively, one, they're a big leap forward. Honestly, particularly the next generation science standards. They're a huge departure if you look at the practices. What they're trying to do is mirror the practices of STEM practitioners and STEM professionals, and they're asking teachers to do that. Well, when has a teacher actually witnessed or practiced that standard themselves, right? So very few teachers actually. They go through the K-12 system, go into post-secondary, and then back into the K-12 system. Well, these practices around scientific practices, those are what scientists do, right? And they're sort of tacit practices that are embedded in the cultures of industry and of scientific research. Well, classroom is quite a bit distanced in most cases from those kinds of practices. So the teacher professional development that tends to work best is when you start combining practitioners from business and industry alongside of educators who know deeply what students, the student piece of it, of how people learn and how they engage and all of that. So when you're bringing those communities together, then you get a lot more effective professional development approaches. So increasing achievement scores should be directly tied to increased teacher effectiveness in STEM.
okay. I guess what I'm saying is I get that, but those are different outcomes. In other words, having the teachers be more effective and giving them the tools to be more effective, is something that we can measure, but that may not necessarily lead to the outcome that we're talking about here.
In terms of increased student achievement?
Yes, we'd like to think it would.
Yeah.
But if the outcome is really around student achievement, then there may be a whole lot of other things that can actually be factors in delivering that. So I'm just trying to understand and make sure the outcomes are tied to the things that we're saying up here in a way that's directly identifiable. And that's all I'm saying, is I didn't see
Linkage.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's logic models to link things. What we've asked is that strategies get, for those outcomes, get logically linked, so that, if I do this, then this, then that, right? And this is one of the challenges with teacher professional development pieces. There are a lot of things in between, certainly teacher content knowledge, and then student effectiveness. Well, it's about the relationship that's established. It's the culture that's established in the classroom. It's about the types of discourse that happens. It's the type of learning environments that are set up, whether it's set up in terms of a sort of rote content focused, or whether it's deeper inquiry focused. I mean, there's a lot of things that are in there, okay, that need to be addressed. So I think that in our conversations today, in those individual groups, targeting those outcomes, these were outcomes that were just sort of immediately apparent and fit on the page. So I could probably list another 20 outcomes for each of these that I think are reasonable to include. So if you can, in your conversations, add to those, please do. Okay, so that we can do that.
Okay, with that,
Okay.
let's move on to the second one. I think that's a good overview.
Okay.
We'll get a chance to come
That
back.
was a long overview.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, that's important, because I think we have to understand what.
We have to understand where these are.
Yeah, okay, let's go to the second one.
The second one is really around providing support for evidence-based STEM programs and practices beyond the school day that exist from early learning through community college. So these are grants programs that would be two-tiered, sort of development. These kind of higher risk, this is a promising approach, let's give it a try, to the broader dissemination type of an approach. So that shows evidence of impacting those outcomes, and we want to spread that across the state. Okay. That's essentially what this is.
And you said out of school? Outside the school day, basically. So these are.
Yeah, I think that's a really fuzzy definition beyond this. It says during and beyond the school day. So these are not intended to be teacher professional development programs, but programs such as robotics programs, outdoor school, access to the High Desert Museum, these types of programs that can complement the formal school system as well. And as we say, sort of that out of school day, sometimes those happen in a school day and sometimes those happen out of the school day, but they're complementing the standard curriculum.
The CTE portion of this.
Yeah.
Now that's a pre-existing program that's going on through ODE.
Yes.
Currently
and
funded.
The Bureau of Labor and Industries. Yeah.
Currently funded. So to go back to Jim's point, the bucket of money that you're kind of thinking around this, if it was to include just out of school and if it was out of school and CTE, there's kind of two numbers possibly there, because I know the
Sure.
CTE piece is not a for sure negotiated type of
Not at all.
reality.
Not at all. And so I think, as I mentioned in my email, there was Dr. Golden and I had a wonderful conversation with Commissioner Ravakian to discuss this. I think there's several people who look at CTE and STEM, and for some people they say, well, aren't those the same thing? Other people say, well, one's about the middle 40 and one's about the 4-year. There's all sorts of perception issues here that we need to sort through. I think the long-term understanding is that right now, let's acknowledge that they're extraordinarily complementary
Yes.
in nature. How they get packaged is one of those things that needs to be discussed at another level and having longer conversations. I think what I wanted to do by including this here is to recognize and endorse by the council that those CTE revitalization efforts are critical and they need to be going forward and they can't be curtailed. So if it were by packaging them with the STEM work broadly jeopardizes that, I would say we shouldn't go there. If it enhances those efforts and garners more support for both of those and provides less confusion for people, then I'd say let's try to package them together. But that is not a done deal, and there's a lot more conversations to be had there. So yeah, there's two different numbers associated
because the CTE
with that.
has a significant
Sure.
political backing and budget, or
Yeah,
existing budget.
yeah.
So,
And they're doing great work.
No,
So Laura and Tom and others
I fall on
there.
that second side of the fence where I think it's extraordinarily complementary. We should try to figure out how to keep this together. I think the messaging would be much easier to the legislature when it comes to funding, appropriations, and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
But what are you thinking then on just the after school kind of portion of the budget?
So
Is that a 10 million, 5 million?
it's closer to 5.
Okay.
5 is the sort of the round ballpark that I put
2
in there.
years, basically.
And then
Right. Just to give you a sense, we had $2.5 million for these kinds of programs during this for the current biennium, and we had 87 applications for those funds, and we were able to fund 16 or 17, Jamie? 16 of them? 16 of them.
What was the total cost of the 87? Did you ever figure out how much it was?
The total cost, yeah, we did. 14.2 million.
Let's
Yeah.
triple this.
Yeah, so, well, what I would say is that some of the funding in that $5 million for the hubs included programming and support for aligned programs to the STEM hub efforts. And then this additionally would, I think, be sufficient for the needs right now. Again, we also want to think about not overextending the capacity to deliver. We need to build the necessary sort of the oversight
Build pace
to make.
success.
Yeah, you want to build on success. You don't want to get too much money. I mean, I think that would be. That's not
It'd be a
that's
hell of
not
a problem to have, yeah.
Well,
That's
it's
right.
not good,
Yeah, I know.
'cause-
Yeah, I know, you start doing dumb things.
You know, so I wouldn't recommend
This-
us going for
The
any
CTE
large
portion
asset.
is what, 13 or 15?
It's 13 or 11 right now, 11 to 12 right now, and I know that they would love to see additional funds in that. I would love to see them targeting a lot more on the middle school programs, and I told the commissioner that because I think that that's where we're losing a lot of our kids is in the middle school.
And
You know, high
make no
school is a little bit
mistake,
too late.
CTE is more than just the middle 40. It
is so much more.
It's big. It's part of the big 40. You know.
It is.
Because if kids don't get exposed to it, they're going to get lost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
The prime examples of the new CTE revitalization, is there a local school that we might be able to go stick our nose in?
Sure, John Niebergall, I know, is doing phenomenal work out at Sherwood.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
but he had that going before the CTE revitalization.
He had that going before the CTE revitalization, but now he's doing the mobile fab lab.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
He's doing great work up the gorge. Great work going up the gorge. I mean, there's so many of those that are just really fantastic programs, and I think people sometimes have a misconception of CTE as being about shop classes and woodworking, and absolutely, I would love to see them bringing back woodworking and shop classes, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about high-tech manufacturing type of stuff, laser cutters, 3D printers, really cutting-edge sort of design, fabrication, blends, you know, kind of these prototype maker spaces, if you will. They're phenomenal, and getting them even into elementary school would be pretty cool too. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Yeah.
Other questions on this strategy? Okay.
The idea here is also just to let you know that the STEM hubs would be closely involved in those decisions, but it's also the intent here is to ensure that there are funds to reach out to communities and programs and schools that are not part of STEM hubs. So from a sort of a geographical equity and meeting the larger term needs of the state, this is how we could also do it. Okay?
So maybe the one last question. Again, how does this get integrated into the broader system? I mean, I think the grant programs are great, and I know what you'd say is, well, if they're really good, they'll get noticed. But is there a way? Does it come back through the hubs, or how do great programs get the visibility, and how do we make them again systemic to the system if they're really great programs?
And that would be up to us or the management of these grant programs, so that the lessons learned, the things that didn't work, as well as the things that worked, get folded and pushed out through the hubs and to other networks, right? So if we see a promising approach in practice, the idea is how do we spread and scale that so that we add additional funds. Oh, and by the way, here on your diagram, you'll see that for the STEM investment fund here, the ones in, I'm sorry for the black and white folks there, but anything in green is a money track, okay? So the intent of the STEM investment fund, in my mind, and I think this was part of the legislation and it's in our House Bill 2636, is that this is a place established under the Treasury for public and private investments to take place. So we need to also build industry partnerships and partnerships with philanthropy to be adding resources into that fund, and not just beholden to. I mean, one of our big challenges is this biennial funding, right? The up and down, and we want sustained funding, in part, you know, to be pushing forward on some of these things. Not sustained in perpetuity. I don't mean that at all. I hate that, you know, to you know, just defend a particular program. But how do we continue to do good work, and particularly when efforts span multiple biennia?
Mark, question on that. The bubble around private investment then that feeds into the STEM investment fund, do you see it possible for those to be earmarked for specific things underneath? I'm just thinking about where we might either see encouragement,
sort of
or
like a
obstacle.
community foundation.
In a sense, you know, sometimes people go to the university, but they want it to go to a specific department, and I can see people want.
I think that is perfectly legitimate, of course. Yeah, I think not a problem there.
Since most of these are community-based actions. Generally, the business and industries around those communities are going to want to donate to their schools or their regions, as opposed to give to the common good that goes outside of their influence. And
But I think it needs to go both ways there.
Yeah, it
I
has to
mean,
go
back
both.
to what we were just talking about earlier, I mean, businesses need to be open to the greater
No,
good.
no,
of
I
what's
understand,
going on here,
and there are
in my personal opinion.
certain businesses that are large enough to think that way.
No,
They're-
not necessarily.
But again, I think the way that we dealt with that in other places is by tying the matching dollars specific to the grants, so that there's requirements to go out and get community support as part of the granting process. Thus not putting the pressure only on industry to push in, but certainly for the education system to reach out and pull in.
Great.
I think you're going to end up with two different vectors of dollars going in. And one that I think that we're looking at managing from a fund perspective should be more vanilla dollars, okay, that can go anywhere. Because I'll tell you, the minute you start slicing and earmarking things, it gets really, really hard to manage where you can actually attribute dollars for supposedly the greater good and equity. I think
Keeping things the same as things are right now, it's keeping things the
yeah,
same.
as opposed to being able to say, okay, here's the portfolio of things that we're investing in. Here are the areas of concern. Here is how your dollars can magnify the actions going on in your area, and you can invest through that vehicle, right? So if I'm in Sherwood, I like the Sherwood program. We're supporting the STEM hub that's actually connected to Sherwood. We're supporting the STEM programs going on in that area. That amplifies the dollars that you put into Sherwood to actually make sure that Sherwood is actually having a great experience there. So that allows us to at least stay clear on what our focus is and being able to deliver on our outcomes, and still lets the people that want to invest directly into their particular school or their particular area the way an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Dwayne.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't quite sure why we would have private industry investing directly here if there's all this opportunity for them to invest in their, because, I don't know, that seems confusing.
So let me try to respond. So I think you're both right on the tracks. Well, all of you are on the same track as I'm thinking here. If I'm channeling a STEM hub, a regional effort, you don't want a broader state sort of organization or fund to start poaching your local dollars. You know, you just don't. And we don't want to start doing that, okay? And yet, there are entities within the state that have interest beyond just their investing in the local need. This is an opportunity for them to invest in a larger area and to make sure that we're channeling some funding to, let's say, the southeast, where there isn't a lot of big industry to contribute locally, but we're able to support, the activities in that community through the state dollars. So that's the idea of some of that.
Ford Foundation, you got Gates Foundation. I see those kinds of things dumping in at the top level,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Because they're
Sort of larger,
organizations.
yeah.
Common good.
Well, but I'd actually put it in a more interesting perspective, because if you turn the clock back 30 years, well, what industries would be sitting at the table? It would be those forestry industries that actually are basically not here right now, or at least not in the same stature. Yet this fund still needs to go on. So the idea that we are balancing and using the dollars of the now to support the whole continuum of activities, I think we have to have a structure that allows that to happen. So having the industry participate at that larger, higher level actually makes a lot of sense, especially recognizing that industry cycles go up and down, and the dollars may not always be there for organizations as well. So having philanthropy involved, having the industry involved, having the government involved, and then putting that into a fund that's focused on the outcomes that we're talking about would hopefully give us the opportunity of having somebody that actually has the funds to continue the mission forward at any given time. At least that's the hope.
I think what everyone's saying is it can be at the top end, it can also be at the
And it
program
can be
level.
local,
So we need to just put an arrow both ways, because there may be local focus, there may be at at the higher end.
Where
so.
can that arrow fit on this diagram? I'll move the private over to the other side,
Yeah,
and then
there
I
you
can
go.
get
Yeah,
another
yeah.
spaghetti on
Yeah,
this
yeah.
diagram.
Yeah. You just got to show it down here coming into these.
Yeah, the other thing is the monitoring and evaluating impact needs to go back up to the private investors as well, right? So,
They could fund that.
you know, that has to go back, feedback
Okay.
through. So,
Any other
okay?
questions on this strategy?
I have
Yeah,
one
go ahead.
question
Yeah.
that's kind of backed up from 3 or 4 stories ago.
Okay.
Since Jim and Dwayne both have asked a couple times on like the infrastructure of what the hub or the state hub or how that all feeds in, is there an example that you can give us of the regional compacts that, do they have, or how are they working?
The
How are they
regional
sharing? The regional achievement compacts that already
The
exist.
regional achievement
How are
collaboratives?
they sharing with one another and how are they working?
Yeah, they're still sorting that out as well. I mean, that's a pretty nascent group. You know, not necessarily at a local level. You know, there's partnerships that have gone on for quite a while at a local level, but as
Are
a
they
sort of
ultimately feeding back into Dr. Golden? Are they feeding back to, who are they?
Oregon
Who do they
Solutions.
answer to?
Well, Oregon Solutions Network is, yes, they feed back in that fashion, but then the Oregon Solutions Network is providing support to the regional achievement collaboratives to convene them, to create partnership agreements and other things. And one of the things that we have recognized between the OEIB and the ODE is that we do not, so Greg Wolf from the governor's office and others are involved in that. And I don't know where they stand or their relationship. Kyle, do you have any sense of Oregon Solutions Network? Yeah.
Well, not exactly. It's formed by the governor. It resides at actually Greg Manley.
So are you talking?
They are working on regional collaboratives, not only around education, but around healthcare and other community.
And economics.
Right. And the idea is to try to have them all working together.
Right.
Because you have all these collaboratives going on at the regional level. So Oregon Solutions is trying to help pull it all together. Because in many communities, it's the same people that are sitting on all of those collaboratives.
Right.
I can't understand why there isn't an example readily available because everybody's doing this. So I'm struggling to.
Yeah, so it's, what does that connective tissue look like? And what are the needs that you're...
There's got to be other states that have already nailed it. So we looked at other states and how they're tying together their collaboratives. And
Sure. So New York is an example, Ohio, North Carolina, from a STEM perspective, they all have regional efforts going on. They look different. Some are driven by their university system, some are driven through economic and workforce, some are driven through a policy arm, and they have different functionality. Oregon is quite honestly the only state in the country that's actually driving it through our broader education system with support and collaboration from industry. It looks more localized in other places, sort of a little more fragmented, I think, a little looser than what we're attempting here. But it is a challenge. Some build websites for people to share. If you build it, they will come. And you do need a repository for, information and resources. I'm not saying you don't, but what you need are really to build trust and interactions and confidence. So I'm not going to pick up your professional development model unless I trust that you really know your stuff, right? So I'm not going to adapt it wholesale. So how do we actually facilitate the deeper conversations? And that takes face-to-face trust building, convenings around common issues, and eventually, after that trust has been built, you can use technological solutions to continue those conversations. But I don't think without building that trust, that communication doesn't happen, is what.
Well, I'll use the model you were just talking about, the Oregon Solutions and Greg Wolf's team with the governor's office, because we work directly with them as part of the Small Business Advisory Council for the state. And you have the regional solutions team that works out of the governor's office that actually has a regional coordinator who coordinates all the resources in that particular area they're responsible for. So they're kind of like the go-to person that understands what that region is doing and can actually do cross-pollination, not only with individuals, but groups in that area too. Now, since they're all part of the same team, they actually have regular meetings where they actually are talking about what's going on and what's working and what's not working in those different areas. So they can actually share with each other what the opportunities are and, so what best practices could hopefully be achieved. Now, each of those have a community college and the small business development centers that are in their regions. So those education centers actually become hubs of communications and activities. At least that's the theory. Now, they're not all created equal, and dollars and cents always get into the picture. So, the ability to deliver and coordinate depends on where the dollars are going at any particular given time, which is developed partially in the budget process.
Right.
So, I think there are examples of what works, but there are also things that we need to be very clear that the dollars we put into the system are going to influence the way people behave.
Yeah.
So, can we use the model in the system that exists in the state? My guess is we probably will, because that's probably one of the easiest delivery mechanisms that are out there.
Yeah.
And it already is part of the education system. They're just not structured to do that right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next.
Okay, any other questions?
Okay.
Let's move on to the third one.
Yep. Third one, fairly quickly. This is around post-secondary. When I say post-secondary, I mean community colleges and 4-year and OHSU. In that, our public university system with public dollars. Would we consider investing in some of the private universities? I'm open to that from what the council says, and certainly whether or not there's legislative constraints on there. That could be certainly an issue. The idea here is twofold. One is to create a lot more responsiveness within the post-secondary environment to industry needs that are changing. These an example of these dollars is what ETIC has been doing for many years to try to incent that adaptation of our 4-year programs to the engineering and technology communities, business communities. And so when we look at our needs across the state in terms of our workforce needs, the medical and biosciences far outstripped any other sort of need in STEM, right? So we should be providing incentives to community colleges and to 4 years to adapt to those needs of that industry sector. High-tech manufacturing is another place where there's a tremendous amount of needs. Agriculture, particularly precision agriculture and natural resource development. And I would say, I would wonder whether or not we would want to include some of our design industries as part of this as well, because as a creative, innovative industry in and of itself, our design industries are tremendous, and I think that they're very much STEM to me anyway. So anyway, I'm putting those out there. So there's that piece. And then we know that it's not enough. Somebody mentioned the Lewis Stokes program earlier. I don't know whether it was this conversation or one that I was having at lunch. Huh? Oh, never. Oh, it was on the email chain? But we saw the Lewis Stokes program, when we were at Corvallis, right? And they presented about the support systems that they're putting into place to ensure that our students of color are being successful in STEM, in achieving STEM degrees. This is the kind of thing that we also need to have throughout the system, other sort of incentive and support structures so that we get the outcomes, not just creating programs, sort of startup programs, but also then for the students and employers themselves to have incentives to produce more STEM graduates and to hire more of our Oregon graduates. So that's the idea of this one in that in that space.
Questions on this one? This one we might want to, again, I think in the second one you talked about equity. This one we might want to try to weave equity into this also.
Much more strongly.
Strong, because it's kind of not there, I don't think. Maybe I missed it.
Well, in B it says especially for women and students of color.
Yeah.
Okay,
but
there it is,
if
yeah.
you want, we can say
Yeah.
for women and students of color. I mean, I'm happy to get more specific.
No, that's fine. See, I was looking up at the purpose, but I see it down here under the description. That's fine. That's good.
Okay, other questions arising from that?
Part of it, I think, is redirection. I mean, some get discouraged. They say, I can't do this, and they maybe just quit.
Yeah.
So it's maybe helping them, okay, maybe it's not physics, maybe that's what they jumped, maybe it's something a little bit different.
I think the
More
critical
achievable,
word,
more fits them, somebody can really counsel them.
So counseling and supports, the academic support and guidance.
or I was going to say the same exact thing, have that input, but then I saw the key word that's in the first paragraph, and that's retention programs.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, that's exactly what I think you're hitting at, and it is something that can easily be done with the schools in these types of grants, is to get them to focus on retaining kids in a variety of different strategies in college. Getting rid of the weed out classes or working through the weed out classes in a different manner than they're currently using. And they do that, they're responsive to that if there's money tied to it. They're not if there's no dollars tied to it.
The student or the school?
No, the schools.
Yeah. And this is one of those kind of short-term, long-term investments that we'd be making because when we look at the system as a whole, this is proximal to the workforce. So this is an area that's going to get broad industry support for. It's also, we know that, looking at the numbers, it appears that there are I wouldn't say sufficient, but there's a lot of individuals within the system at the post-secondary level who are not then attaining their goals and going on into careers in STEM. So there's a lot already there. And I think that this is one of those places that if we invest, we should be able to see some really short-term gains nearly in a very short time frame. And so whereas as we invest in the longer-term system of teacher professional learning or development, those changes occur over a great...
Pipeline versus right at the end.
Yeah.
We're scrapping 60% of the kids.
we have to do it, yeah. Well, exactly. If only 40% are actually attaining degrees,
If
then
we could
it's...
reduce the scrap rate by 10, 15%, we're going to make a massive change in regards to the number of graduates coming through the system.
All right.
A couple things I would just add. I think on the outcomes, it seems like retention rate's pretty important then in terms of outcome.
Great, retention rate.
Retention rate, and I'm not sure necessarily an outcome here is increased tax revenues. Only because those jobs are going to get filled. I guess you could assume that the jobs are going to leave the state. So it's a question of what's your assumption here on increased tax revenues. If it's just Oregon grads filling Oregon jobs, if it's creating new jobs, that's great. But I don't think any of our strategies here is about creating new jobs necessarily. It says degrees, but we don't necessarily make the linkage to that. Yeah, I don't know.
He's going to get tired of hearing me say that.
It's not just about filling jobs, it is about creating jobs as well, right? So if we're creating innovators in our system, people with foundations in STEM, they're going to actually be job generators
But then I think
as
you
well.
can look at that as increased jobs. I think it just says increased Oregon grads in Oregon jobs, in increasing Oregon jobs, or we got to see that there's more jobs too. So
Someone's got to be.
there's got to be more jobs. The revenues is kind of an outcome of the jobs.
Yeah.
If we get the jobs, we track Oregon jobs in STEM fields, then we'll.
One of the critical pieces for this piece of the organization is to work with the other agencies within the state that are their job is to create those jobs or to help sponsor it. And we've had this with ETIC. We're just the talent folks. We just put the talent out there, and industry is supposed to come and pull from it. There are other agencies in economic development and stuff that are supposed to be coordinating that with us. So.
Like the regional
And
solutions.
just like encourage entrepreneurship or support entrepreneurship or something like that. So
I mean,
that's sort of.
I think she's right on. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to be creating the jobs of the future as well as actually creating the talent that will be in them. Right, because I mean, the joke that's not so funny is that many of the industries that we're talking about actually, many of these jobs and organizations didn't exist 35, 40 years ago, at least not in their current form. So, and that's been speeding up.
Yeah.
So by the time the kids get through this system, they may be starting the next round of companies, hopefully.
Yeah. I think that's true.
Price tag for this one, just so people get a sense of it.
So ETIC's sort of innovation dollars right now, or growth in innovation dollars, is around $7 million, is my understanding. So that's with the computer science and informatics as well as the engineering. So I think it's reasonable to expect that to double as
I'd ask for 15
this.
to 20 million.
Yeah, 15 to 20 is.
So, Mark, one additional comment.
Yep.
The first two as areas are fairly clear conceptually. This is more about messaging. So when I look at statewide STEM network, I can grab that around my head fairly quickly. The CTE grant program is fairly clear. This is soft.
Is it?
From a messaging standpoint.
Okay.
So when this gets communicated, post-secondary responsiveness, what does
Yeah.
that really mean? And so I think it's really important for us to, because we are
good.
also selling. You know,
Yep.
With this, we have to have that marketing hat on. So I think we need to have a way of defining that container of value that people can say, yes, I want that.
I think the word investment is critical. You know, to say what it is. I know we've thrown this around, but it's about talent investment. It's about breaking down barriers in the schools to produce what industry needs. It's got to have industry investment, something in it.
Post-secondary
but
talent
Eric, you
investment.
hit on the point that I really wanted to raise here, because it's about breaking down the barrier. Because it's not just about being responsive. Because the
Yeah.
problem is that that's the old model that somehow or another we can teach to the skills that are needed. But to Dwayne's point, the skills that are evolving so friggin' quickly that what happens is that it's not so much about responsiveness as much as integration. That when you integrate and you break down that wall between what is taught in the classroom and what is happening now in industry, that opens up, it increases the relevancy of the education, and it also allows them to be more adaptable to learn what is happening today, what are the skill sets. I mean, we see this all the time in computer languages, right? The languages that are being used today are not oftentimes being taught today, because the people who are teaching them are, because in 3 years, a whole new set of languages are coming up on board.
We're still teaching Fortran, didn't you?
I know.
Really?
That's just an example.
Fortran 77.
There's not a lot of, and that's one of the challenges that we have here, is that and when you break down the walls,
Yeah.
and practitioners are working with kids, the kids are more, the education is more vital, but we also are more adaptable.
So the group that's going to be looking at this, can you consider words like post-secondary talent development or some sort of other descriptor that captures that better? I think that's a really, I was not, we talked about incentive fund, and that was wishy-washy responsiveness. I thought, oh, well, we want it to respond, and then it's like, yeah, thank you. It's not a good moniker, so figure out. How's that?
So any glaring missing things on this page that people say, boy, we really missed something here and we should have had it from these 3 basic high-level strategies before we move to the next phase of this process?
Well, just real quick, what was the number for the network?
The number for the network is around 5.
5.
Yeah.
All numbers are in biennials, right?
Right.
Yeah, so biannually, this is around a $50 million ask with CTE. It's around a $35 million ask without. And I know those are large numbers. I see Doug shaking his head. Thanks. We'll put more meat on the bones.
Well, some of this is already like the.
Some of it's already existing.
The secondary
Yeah.
stuff, there's something there already.
A lot of it's already is repurposing,
Repurposing,
right? So we see, some of the STEM network dollars are already in there with the current ODE grants. Some of the STEM CTE grant program dollars are already in the system. The ETIC dollars are already in the system. So the differential is certainly not that.
It's important to talk
Might be
about
helpful to
that.
break that apart
Yeah,
for
to
clarity.
show existing and then kind of.
We will in the end.
Yeah.
I've been specifically asked not to, and so I feel like I'm violating some.
But to have that in your hip pocket. Just to
She's
have it in
not
your
here.
hip
No, wait. I can't do that either.
Yeah, right.
But no, I mean, I actually said that I think people would feel you need to have a sense of the magnitude of what you're going to be targeting, even, knowing that some of that is going to be ratcheted down. And I don't like to play that game. I want a real number of what we can invest now, and be actually, as we develop the model for these, which is going to take a little more work, that we say, here's a realistic figure, here's how that grows over time, here's where we start downsizing that as well. I don't want to be putting something into place that feels like it's in perpetuity.
Say what maybe he's not allowed to say. There's about $20 million of current appropriations that's probably already existing, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so the gap is about half.
But I think this is an
Yeah, it's
overall
about
question
half,
on pace. This is what we think is the right pace. less money, you either can't do it or you have to reduce the pace. I mean, you
Right.
can't have the kind of
Right.
you can't have the kind of spread and exposure with 2 million as you can with 5, and so it's not going to have the impact, the collective impact.
Well, we do have the issue, I'll say it again, is we have a window here of actually getting something done.
Right.
The legislature's not going to give us 8 years to scale something. They're gonna wanna see some results.
Yeah.
So we gotta figure out in the very beginning, which ones are gonna be able to spin quickest. Have the best story to go back and ask for more time and more money.
And these are so tied together. I mean, a network without programs isn't very helpful, and a program without a network isn't very helpful too.
No,
So it's important that
exactly.
these aren't either or kind. Now, maybe secondary, but the secondary is how we get the bread and butter out the door. You know, in terms of
It's
median.
where the rubber hits the road, yeah.
Yeah,
But
those
if
are
we
the high-value
haven't
jobs.
invested in the system,
Yeah, right.
upstream from that, we're not going to get those outcomes either. So all of these are really, very much interplay. And if we don't have the statewide system, I don't see any way that we're going to have coherence. Where the opportunity cost is we continue to invest in these one-off programs that have, very minor local impact with very little systemic impact. And what we really need to do is have this greater systemic impact.
The other risk you have with the third one is if we don't develop the first two, we'll be educating other people's students. Whether it's foreign students or outside of the Oregon students, which isn't quite the kind of the
Well, you
objective.
might-
I mean, we want to get, this is really, we need to be careful on this, that it's focusing on
We-
Oregon students, that we get them through the system.
We don't have to look too many blocks away to see an example of that, right? Where, the reality is
Well,
that
the
they need
reality is
it.
business is going to get the education, and what we're trying to do is provide the opportunities for Oregon students here, and that's the failure of our system is, business, your business, our, we recruit all over. If we need people, you guys all do that. I mean, you're going to get the best talent you can, and you'd like it to be Oregon because you have a better chance of retention.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, if they're not here, those jobs will get filled because we have to, or else we'll move out of the area, one of the two. We won't, but others will.
Well, it's
We're not going to move, but
Well, it's from the industry partners that I've talked with, it's twofold. One, yes, you want the pipeline and you want to come in, but also if you're having to recruit people from outside the area,
Yeah.
you need solid K-12 systems, in order to
recruiting.
recruit talent to the state.
That's exactly-
And if we're not increasing, these programs, that are within the state, if we had a really sound STEM program across the state, people are going to go, oh, I want to move to Oregon. Not only is it drop dead beautiful and great people, but hey, they've got a killer school system, and we can't really say that last part right now.
Yeah, we just tried to recruit someone for a job, not at our company, but at a company I'm a board member of. And the first question they ask is, I want to know about your education system.
Yep.
I want to know
They've
the
got
quality,
kids.
because I don't want my kids put in an education system that's not quality.
Yeah.
So,
And if we can't attract talent, we've got to build or attract it. And we
okay, we're
just
speaking to
as
the
well.
choir
Okay.
on this issue, so
Okay.
let's move on. So
Let's
go.
move on. So what I'd like us to do is cordially break into 3 groups to talk about through this page, okay, and this one, both of these, the questions there. And we're going to have to keep them fairly crisp. We'll give the 1 hour time ding, but work through each of these strategies and those questions. So strategy number 1, do I have volunteers? So if we're 9 people, 3 each.
Yep.
Okay, and Chair, would you like to incorporate audience participation in
Sure,
those
I think
3
that'd be
groups
good.
as well?
Sure.
At the same time? I think that rather than having it separate, that would be wonderful. So from a council member perspective, strategy 1 around STEM networks. Aubrey Thompson?
Okay.
Can we have a 3rd volunteer for the STEM networks?
I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
I know a lot about it.
You want
I can do that.
You want to be a part of that one?
Sure.
Okay, great.
We'll be done within an hour.
Aubrey
Yeah.
Thompson. Oh, gee. Wait a minute. I promised to separate the 2 of you guys.
I was wondering about that too.
After that first council meeting, you're not sitting next to each other, are you? Seth has very specific instructions. Okay, so the 3 of you around the STEM hubs, around the CTE grant program, STEM grant program, P14.
Do you want me not focusing on the third one?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Well-
Yeah.
That's a better way of asking the
Well,
question.
I think you should be
On the third.
on the third
Okay.
one, because you're bringing a level of expertise and knowledge around
right.
what to make that most effectively, and you're going to have much more complete responses. So my level of expectation for that has gone way up. Okay. So,
Only if I can have Lisa, because she's the brains of the operation.
Okay.
okay.
All right.
And a third person to be part of that, Jessica, for the hubs.
So,
Sorry, Herb.
You're late.
So how about Jim and myself and Herb on the grant program?
Sure.
And then audience, what we'll do is we'll have, since Jim and I are here, we're going to have the meeting of the CTE, or the STEM, P14 STEM grant program here. And you guys can go there. And the other one there. How's that? Or in the back. And audience members, feel free to join whichever group you feel most affinity toward. Okay?
So, and also,
Joe, maybe you can join us.
You know, the first
the grant
question,
program?
you may not have it, hopefully you do, but its first question is, how does
That'd
it
be okay?
align with the 2015-2017? Is that in their packet? Because that's one.
I don't have that.
I sent you to the by email, but I didn't photocopy them.
Okay.
All right.
Right? So don't overly, if you can't answer the question, don't overly worry about the question.
We can share that. If something
Okay.
happens, we can share it around.
Does that make sense? If you can't answer it, don't worry about it.
Don't fake it till we make it.
So, the statewide STEM network there,
Kind of over in that corner over there.
the STEM grant program, and the post-secondary talent development
Right here.
over by Kyle.
Over by Kyle, right?
Yeah.
So we get a little bit of space.
Okay? So STEM hubs can go.
STEM hub's in that corner over there.
STEM hubs in that corner,
That one there.
then us come on in.
Statewide network.
Networks, right.
Statewide network is there, grants program here.
Okay.
Go to the guy in the gray with the coffee cup. All right.
No one comes to the grant, we know there's not an interest.
I'm gonna run to the restroom.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Just don't run to the bar.
Good, well, I think we got general agreement.
Did we?
Yeah,
I think so. I
think-
didn't hear any pushback.
No, I think you've covered it. I think it's good. I think it's,
Thank God.
it's good.
It's workable. I saw Doug back there. He's from the fiscal office. He's, so we're gonna have to package this differently for
Well,
him.
but I think
you know?
it's a connection system, and I think the connection, ultimately you have to get the outcomes. These all connect. It gets you a platform to deliver. It allows you to try things out to do and a network to make them work, and then ultimately reinforcing in the system to accept what's coming through it. If, without any of these, as I said, if these are all so well connected that without one it doesn't work. Now, it's just a matter of pace. I mean, to me, at some point you say it's not real, it's not worth it. You haven't got enough here to do it. Forget it. You're not serious about this. We're done.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and at some point we can go a little slower. It might not, and it's going to take time, and you're not going to get the impact.
We're gonna have to get pretty tight, though,
Yeah.
from the first.
Yeah.
I don't want to overreach.
Yeah.
Can you find somebody to make sure that they're writing these down, not just talking about them?
Yes, I actually had a question.
But if we can actually write the responses down?
Oh, you're looking at me.
Yeah, I was looking at one of the council members to make sure that we're capturing it on, because you have the bigger pieces.
Wait, is this the hum?
The hub conversation is here.
Okay,
Leave
I
the
want
post-secondary.
Post-secondary?
So-
No, let me.
You need a
Let me
slide
clarify
that
about
you make note.
No,
Is no one joining you on grants?
we're wondering.
Apparently not.
All right, so,
I'm not feeling loved.
And again, if you can't, if there's an existing orientation, don't try to have completion.
We're gonna do the same thing. We're supposed to do both. We're supposed to do both. Answer both questions, right?
Legibly scribble.
So is there an overlap from the Workforce Investment Board?
Huge. This one is everywhere. Interesting. So this might be helpful.
Good to see you again.
Maureen.
Sorry. Yes, Maureen. It's a pleased to see you again. Yeah.
So Maureen was just saying, just go ahead and say what you just told me, Maureen, just so you
Yeah, so I'm sitting here, I serve on the OWIB,
Right.
and then I'm also on the OWIB little subcommittee.
Oh, are you good?
Yeah, and we met yesterday, and I just asked, how much integration is there with STEM in the investment council? There's so many pieces that need to be
Part of this, yeah.
integrated, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I speak fairly regularly with Agnes.
I know,
So,
yeah.
that has to happen.
She
And-
has an eye on everything, so that's.
And, we have not been shy about putting forward with the STEM hubs either, that the WIBs have to be a part of the conversation, the regional solutions
It's
have
all
to
at
be
the
this.
local level,
If you
yeah.
notice, it's like tightly coupling education, workforce, and economic development, and if we're not doing that,
So it's probably more like, when we talk about the LWIBs,
right?
we should be integrating STEM
Yes,
information.
exactly. That's what I would love to
Okay.
see that.
That's helpful, yeah, that's where the
Yeah,
nexus needs to
absolutely.
be.
So,
Yeah.
a few years ago, there was a grant, a series of grants that did do some STEM integration with, I believe it was through local workforce investment boards. I'm not sure that I know where a final report from that grant came from. I can send you some of their initial
Okay,
stuff.
let me give you a card.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe,
All right.
maybe the OWIB could just kind of review that.
Do we want to move over
Sure,
towards
sure.
like an
Let's go
open
to the
spot?
end.
I feel like these tables are in the way of me. You want to?
Okay, which way are we going?
Right over
We're
here.
just going right over here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just,
I'm Joe
interested.
Oshiro. So I give you a card, but it's only good till the end.
I
Yeah.
probably see
University.
you.
I think we got enough chairs over here.
We do? Okay.
This one over here.
Yeah.
All right. We got five people. What do you got?
Great. So, the grant itself. Okay, so aligning with the OEID's 2015-17 budget strategies and priorities, repurposing, allocating funds. So it's one. This one in particular is a strategic investment, right? So it's already there, and it's already there primarily as a grant program. So
It shows up as a strategy too, basically, transformation, innovation, effective strategies.
it shows up there, but we should also be aligning, well, like some of these other ones start aligning to workforce development, regional collaboration. So the OEID hasn't yet realized how much STEM is touching on all of these things. So we will articulate that.
It ties in here.
It could be tied here for a grants program. It could be 3 to 3 success. So it could be. So we're looking at our strategy
Around grant.
to grant programs. But if we're looking at investing in early learning, then it's going to be there.
Supporting out of school youth.
Yeah.
Does there too. Does that, grant does, well, regional collaboration does, and we say that we're trying to share this across regions.
I think when they talk about supporting out of school, they're talking about programs. Not after school programs, but would be out
But
of
if
school.
kids are engaged,
Engaged, you can hold.
So I would say,
Yes,
why
that
not?
can.
Purposely
you get
engage.
them, you get these kids into things they do with their hands, and the program
Yes.
they're trying to do skills, they actually may come back to school if they see a value in grant programs that work.
Yeah.
Works for 11 to 14,
Yeah.
kids just don't want to go to college.
Do you also see this kind of being responsive to HPs, in terms of where those focuses are?
How this is actually generally
Focus-based funding.
Yeah, it's not a base funding.
It's not a base funding, it's not a base build strong early learning systems and targets.
No, we're talking about the grant program, not the first one.
So this one, it does increase the targeting and leveraging investments. It does do that. Trying something, so just those two.
I would actually argue that if it's right, if it does give you achievement outcomes, because we're gonna close the achievement gap in STEM.
Oh, yeah, but that's just the achievement of outcomes, it's not the achievement gap.
It says focus base funding. So this is only base funding, we're not base funding,
Yeah,
so,
okay, so
and
yeah.
build strong early learning systems. So it's just.
Oh, it does, it's 3%.
Strength of early learning, if they're doing STEM right, those systems are better.
These are funds for the early learning council.
Okay, so then its third strategy is build statewide support eligibility.
Actually, the network for quality teaching and learning needs to tie, that's tied to the hub.
That's the hub.
Absolutely.
Let's say.
Yeah, we could make a
School, but the post-secondary it does, it doesn't say.
not the way.
Is that you, Fred?
I think people are dropping off.
Okay.
Yes. Dissemination.
Well,
Well, yes. I mean, there's
Some
a
of
lot
these
of
programs will generate some of that.
Okay, so that's right.
And a lot of
So
times
it's pretty
those
well,
definitions don't generate.
arguably the grant program is fairly well aligned with these strategies. But at least for sure on education systems and career readiness.
The only question came to mind on regional. What does that mean, regional, is that by the hub? Because you look at Indian tribes, their reservations regions, unless you embed them with something like
They're
Palm
supposed to.
Springs would embed with
Right.
Madras or something.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening with the Umatilla and Pendleton, so that's the intent. There's a lot more work to be done there, but what we've asked the STEM hubs to do is to reach out to
I think it's important also that the grant programs, the grant programs we look at have regional kind of applicability potentially. I mean, if it's just a one-off, I mean, I think as a grant program, if you just say it's just this grant program, it's one thing that never could be applied anywhere else, it's interesting, but that's something we would fund.
So I love it.
Yeah.
So we're tying, these are dollars that would align to regional average, right? So just trying to bring that argument.
Okay. Is the strategy related to repurposing? Yeah, okay. I guess the answer is yes.
So it's all three.
Yeah. Well, is
It's
it
reallocation of some funds. Like, what we need here is to take them out of the.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. And
Tell me, this is your value, Billy. Look, I don't know where there's.
I haven't told them that.
Yeah. So it's some repurposing like the ETIP funds or the CTE funds. So it's the same thing. It's not repurposing.
It's reallocating.
Government structure.
Yeah.
It's reallocated.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes. The question.
And new funds, right? Because we want to grow.
Scrap rate dropped 55%.
So new funds,
Yeah, allocating.
For a lot of proposals that cause generally the changes in behavior.
Develop strategies to improve the outcomes of our society. And OEIDs and bring notes.
Yeah, what are the, what are the key?
Those are the,
I don't know if they have the scorecard on that, do they?
I kind of go back and forth on it.
I can do that part, so don't worry about that one.
Just out of curiosity, what are those key outcomes around? Are they key achievement outcomes?
Well, some of them are showing proficiency, reading proficiency by third grade. Some of them are on-track indicators, ninth grade credits earned, early college credits. So all of those are
STEM related.
not really. There's some around proficiency that in general that isn't. So one of the I would say dropout rates and keeping kids in school. This one, college aspirations,
Post-secondary aspirations.
aspirations, there's career, connection, and
Do they have good data on that that shows that kids, a lot of kids drop out, but have they done any studies to show that kids more integrated with STEM kinds of things, CTE kinds of things, are likely to stay in school? And that sounds right, but
yeah, there's some more emerging. Yep.
that's good.
Engagement and relationships are the biggest reasons people drop out. And so we do know that students are much more engaged, and we know that these work for ELL students in some ways better than other methods. From a language learning perspective, because you're giving people a reason to learn the language.
Well, and you're giving them something specific to talk about rather than, a story and a book.
I think the key here is that you have to broaden it, because the strategy by itself, I guess the strategy is grant programs, but the whole strategy is taking those grant programs steps. You gotta take 3 steps to get to the big impact, because a grant program by itself, just doing things, you have to assume it's successful, that then the programs are then disseminated through the system, and then, of course, that takes time. You're not gonna see immediate, I know this is a hard thing to say, but it's not gonna happen overnight.
Well, what we can do is we can see immediate change in students' perception of the reasons they're at school, of their motivation, their interest in potentially STEM careers. We can see some of that immediately.
That's the grant program that you're running in that area that's going to see those one kids. The collective impact is going to take longer. So I just make sure that you don't say we're not promising this big thing. This will lead to a system which will then.
Well, then ideally it actually changes the way teachers teach.
I totally agree with that.
That's what I like to
Are
see.
the grants like seeds, so you plant seeds and the ones that are successful are replicable and line item budget?
Practically speaking, it takes you a year to run a grant program, maybe 2 years. You're going to have success, you're going to have to run this to see it prove. Then you're going to have to move it into the hubs, then you have to, I hate to say, this does not happen
Well, so
overnight.
many of these are going to be aligned directly to the hubs.
Right.
So we would want them to disseminate, be the agents.
But it takes 2 years to run a program, right? To get a program figured out, to test it, to see how it works, and learn from it. And then the other hubs will have to figure out how to incorporate that into their process. Just the system here, I know you think this is going to happen overnight.
I know. I've been at this a long time.
I mean, so.
Peace Corps, remember? 20 years, we'll see.
No, and I just think we have to let people know that there's a pace to making this happen, and it's going to have to be a long-term commitment. It doesn't happen by just saying we do it 1 year and we're done.
Yeah.
There's a-
This is just a start.
Summer.
And again, I go back to
Right, for those kids.
For those kids, so that's, between 6 and 9 months.
large.
20 kids.
Tweak it.
A lot of my kids are very awesome. They subsidized their junior senior program, which are in smaller groups and
Look how many
specialized.
kids we got in the program.
We always
we got a scale issue, right? I'm doing the math on this, and I totally agree. It gets it, but are they still doing that?
Uncovering those kinds
That,
of
the curriculum kids from that are still in use around Corvallis and
good programs.
to giving engineering days within Gear Up summer camps. And I think they're still in Corvallis Boys and Girls Club. So there are some ongoing use. I'm not sure they've ever gotten the funding again to do the whole thing, 5 days of engineering, but I think they've definitely done 2 or 3 days of engineering.
They're only using one program, right? They're only using the Corvallis. I'm just
They're
saying,
using them in Gear Up camps. Gear Up is like 30
What
schools
I
statewide.
what I think I'm hearing you say
But yeah.
is that
Pocket of excellence.
if we were to be given these dollars, if we were trusted to invest these dollars, what we would need to see is a real intentionality about how that investment then gets spread. Well, one, is it effective? First.
Right.
And then for whom? And then what aspects of it are required to then, what made it effective, and how do we spread those things? So, well, maybe you just have a really charismatic person. The program sucked, but that person was so charismatic that everybody loved it. Well,
You can
that's
do
not
some-
replicable.
Right. You can do some early tracking of the results, but if you don't make, if you're not going to make the next investment to make this systemic, why spend it? I mean, because the people, if they get tired of this and say, well, it didn't work, and so we're done, or it worked, but we're not going to fund it, why spend the money in the first place? So I think the understanding has to be is this is a program. You have to move this into the system to get the long-term results. We'll prove that it works. We'll prove that the early numbers work. You've seen some success. But if I don't fund this tomorrow or the next day, why am I investing in a grant program? And that's understanding.
And part of this, I think, is that with the K-12 system, that's going to take, that moves at glacial speed. Okay, so this, by focusing on the sort of the after-school, the extended learning opportunities, to me, is an extraordinarily nimble space, and your return on your investment was rapid and it was effective, and I think that we can scale those programs a lot faster than we can. We have to address equity and access and some of the other things, but I
suck those programs into the school day. We've seen that with robotics
Right.
and
They started outside.
programming again and again.
started outside and moved in.
That's what you want to do. You want to have a successful program that gets pulled in by the students.
Instead of hiring projects, haven't been an adjunct myself, by the way.
This is also about
Instead of hiring, like, what might not provide jobs under try 3, 4, 5
Right,
terms.
accelerating the change in a district,
Terms,
right?
6 terms, and then also
The
tie
district
that
raised
to
money
the
for one robotics team in the
forecasting,
zone. This
seeing
is
that
3 robotics
job
teams.
class there. And then try to take care of those bumps, because when they go up and they staff up to bumps and things.
Okay, so
The regional schools are very good at this, actually. It's the 2 or 3 research institutions in the state that struggle with this.
Yeah, but I think the buy-win is the interesting
Our solution for adding capacity by hiring tenure track
and we'll make measurable
And by the
difference for
way,
those impacted by that.
those
May
individuals, they're very, very, very good.
Yeah.
And one of the things
there is ways to
out of the community college.
Yeah, that's the
So
terrible stuff
OIT
is, we talked about the children's program, kids go through a program of really stimulating learning. You're not gonna know for 8 years maybe until how those kids,
But it's definitely,
you can observe capabilities and maybe exposure, but
if it's one-time investment money,
The
they have to
biggest,
figure out how to carry, they're gonna hire a full-time
career
professor,
in
so they've got to figure out how they're gonna carry that under a book
is
long
whether the
term.
kids
If they
see
realize they
themselves
can't
as
do
a
that,
scientist,
they
wants
might
to
come
be
to
a
the
scientist. Even if they're pulling B's and A's, right? You know, the high grade in math, turn it on.
It is. So we can see this if we're investing in 6th grade. We can see it. And I think between really 4th and 8th grade.
Well, then it's really
We
important
see
to
that.
get a good
But
cut of
so-
where the data is. Well, if you better get the data early at 6th grade of what kids see themselves as, and then maybe measure it again in 8th grade.
One of the things that I would suggest that we do for this, because I think this whole P14 is great, but I would suggest that we actually just say, we're specifically targeting and then just say, this is the biggest, we believe that research indicates that this is the biggest leverage point, and we're going to target 4th through 8th grade. Boom.
The window for students, not a day decide what they want.
They do. I don't want to do that.
Or is it the application?
That's how they see themselves. Yeah, very much. So I don't know whether the council would be comfortable with that, but
Well, I think that's what our question always gets to is
I
then,
think
what
this
about the
first
early?
biennium, you don't want to tie it that tight. I think you want to say it includes fourth through eighth grade so that you can keep up some of those outputs that put those kids going into post-secondary, saying, I want to be an engineer.
Graduates was another.
Scientists, I want to
can
be
we
a
cover
doctor.
that though here?
That's
I
actually
mean,
what you're talking about.
so if we're,
If you say that.
you know, the transition, the post-secondary transition, we can get here.
In the swim lane and exactly.
It's, I'm just wondering.
The high school kids are lost though. That's the question.
The high school kids are going to be the CTE revitalization. Most of the high school kids don't participate in free choice learning environment anymore at that point. So I don't think we lose anything. You know, as long as we continue CTE revitalization, that it actually occurs at the secondary, high school level.
So you would focus the grant program, okay, at least.
So are you going to set the first robotics grant program in undergrad?
Or we would support, I think, you know,
Right now,
practice.
it's a separate line. So we don't even have any control over their evaluation framework.
Like Kyle, I actually have
We
a
could
very.
it's not going to here. I would like to see, well, I think supporting, you know, programs such as Orton is a place to find those programs into you.
The fourth and eighth grade is a great place now to focus because those kids are in the system right now. It's important. If you don't feed the system, I don't know the data to show if they don't have yeah, well, I just don't know how, we definitely did this group because of the most exactly because they are where they are right now. You don't want to lose this kind of, you don't want to lose them all feeder. Yeah, you don't want to lose the feeder system too. So there's probably some, you could say focus on fourth and eighth grade. I think you still want to look at where
The earlier learning.
because if you don't get them there, then you don't. I don't know what the receptivity is. Clearly, you have an opportunity to have some people on the fence go either way. You'd like to have a bigger group on the fence, which means you got to do your early learning.
Yeah, so I think if the early, if I would see a greater responsiveness from the early learning folks about picking up the STEM mantra, I would be absolutely, I think that's a longer look. But we could say, what about, we could say early learning and middle school, those are two transition points, right? The early learning piece and there's interactive environments for and CD and stuff like that, and then there's, but that's already in the works, they're already making that ask, we just need them to STEMify it.
Period, nine grade's not the right way to think about it.
Yeah, so it's really birth through kindergarten. Yeah. Although people sometimes go to third grade.
That's what I wanted to understand. I was like
3 to 3, so that's
that's what I worry about. There's two targeted areas. I think at this point, if you don't get them in this way, high school is too late.
It's too late. And I'm not actually, I think many of the early, you know, first, second, and third grade teachers actually teach the way we want. It's just why?
So I think your point is really addresses the high school. At that point, they can get their.
So we should make this a K-8 STEM program instead of a P-14.
Yeah.
P-8.
But you have CTE in here also.
I know.
So I
I'd
think
say
that's.
go ahead and keep it P14, say firm focus on 4th through 8th, but don't rule out.
14 is it?
14 is 9th grade.
Okay.
I think he's talking about 14.
Oh. Well, okay, well, I was thinking high schoolers as the time when you realize 10th grade GPA is probably more. Well, that seems to be when they forget. So there still seems to be that supportive or some way to help high schoolers. It's not all lost here.
So we can hope that CT.
You know, and you still got to support
But, you know, if somebody has
never be your CT.
a stellar, if somebody has a stellar opportunity to make an expanded learning opportunity, internship, or whatever in the high school level, I wouldn't want to rule them out.
Those internships at high school levels
You
can
say it
transfer.
increased by 20%.
So why
Yeah,
don't we just
especially those that
You
are
give them
low
real
grade.
work and
Okay. So I'm going to put with particular focus on building positive STEM identities at the 4th through 8th grade.
Yes.
How's that?
So I have a question. Part of this is about access to reach out to children. I like the other one. So how is addressing that part of the issue?
Well, what are the
That takes communicating with parents. You just
Well, it's also saying that we incentivize OMSI to spread their programs beyond their Saturday Academy to work on the eastern side of the state, or it can look a lot of different ways. Taking Chick Tech and they want to take it from Eugene and start something in Klamath Falls because some people say they want to do that.
Or support the presence of tech or
So I guess the question is, what's the equity lens around the grant programs in terms of distribution? I mean, you got so much money, how do you ensure that goes to high percentage towards the?
Yeah, prioritize. Do you want to put a number on it? We can. I mean, with at least 50% investments, targeting students.
Populations, whether you call that, yeah. I think you should be clear about that.
Okay.
That'd be a metric.
Oh, but the standards are into that.
50 is the right number, 60, 40, I don't know, but 50 place to start.
Well,
But that says, given
Yeah, I
we
think
only
it's
got
a bad
10% of the kids in there, maybe 15% of the population,
It
50% of the dollars, that seems like.
we're talking about 38% of our
It's the
population.
assessment that they pass to earn this badge.
So that's today. That's great.
And 50% of them are free and reduced.
So I think that we're more than 50%. I mean, really, I mean, if that's the numbers, 50% of them just 1-to-1.
Equity lens,
It's just a mechanism for them to demonstrate something they might not do.
concentrated on students of color, may end up shorting rural Oregon, where it's more generated in poverty in some places.
That's why that's a small.
But then we've got, our Native American communities.
Yes.
I say 60.
60%?
I'm
Okay.
giving you
Make
some of
it
the numbers.
60%?
I mean, they're the ones that are struggling the most. They're the ones that need, this is not about trying to be fair, this is about where they need the help, you know? And we're gonna all close rights.
If you build it, they won't come. They have to just.
So this is an intentional focus to really be putting out and that they work with those communities in order to determine what that programming looks like. It's not just taking white programming and pushing it out, right?
I was in my last job.
Yes,
Okay.
there are programs out there that know how to do that.
Use that model, you know, the
60%.
buckets. It seems to me that for this post-secondary investment to be successful, the pipeline from 8th grade math
I don't know how we
literacy,
define
9th grade
that.
health, to, you know,
The typical STEM definition.
community college to just would move to all employees.
That's what I was worried about, because it seemed like they do really well already.
But it does include the zip guide.
That's not That's right. I'm not trying to change age, but they seem just fine.
They are overrepresented.
Yeah, I know, they do great, and that's because of the strong culture. We could learn something from that culture.
Well, come on, they've been taking the equivalent of SATs for 5,000 years.
Well, and how long their kids spend in a school day. There's ours.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to 4th.
No idea.
Oh, being
Yes.
Oh.
So we've got that one down. What evidence enhances strategy?
Do we want to have, within the equity lens, I guess, given STEM, do we want to say anything about gender?
In the equity lens?
It does not.
It doesn't address.
It doesn't in the equity lens.
Yeah, it seems to be
Shouldn't you say
a combination of
60%?
both. E14 STEM universities beyond 14.
Children of color and women of color or something.
It's still, yeah, it's,
If we're gonna add it, it's up to percentage.
Yeah, then I think you're right. Let's discriminate against the white
What? The way you get around that, you have to say the program intentionally recruits and supports youth of color and or women, doesn't have to exclude male
She hasn't experienced this.
I married one.
Pale male?
I married a very pale male. My aunts run around and say,
So
why is this baby so
70%
pale?
For women, or is it for women?
Why don't we go 75? Okay.
So that
75.
15% for women.
We don't specifically
Well,
say
I mean,
it.
so,
75%.
Or you could,
well, I mean, so I would say that women are overly represented in the healthcare and biosciences right now. So we don't need to have programming that's targeting, women in biosciences.
And often, what is more inclusive of women is more inclusive of students of color, so I don't think we want to break those out as two separate categories. I think that'll make writing the RFP and
The other, on the other hand, I don't want to have people who haven't explored the needs of their communities of color just say, well, we're going to intentionally recruit women into this program, which we saw a lot of grants applications do that. Well, we don't have any, they say.
The minority groups are going to want to do their own thing. Distribution issue.
Right.
So we have to divvy it up somehow.
I worry that it all becomes women.
Yeah. So let's do 60% students of color, and then there's also certainly, women is a big part of our
You could say traditional underserved.
And what programs?
So then if it's underrepresented, then we say 75%, is that what we're saying? 75% of that grant fund will be targeting underrepresented That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
This comes up all the time.
What evidence indicates that the strategy will result in improvement? So we've got evidence from ORTOP, from other investments.
from OPAC. OPAC is the Oregon Robotics Tournament and Outreach Program, which runs robotics programs for kids from kindergarten to high school. OPAC is the Oregon Pre-Engineering and Applied Sciences Initiative, which was the pipeline piece of TIC funding. So Saturday Academy, yes, was the Margaret.
Well, I mean, those sorts of programs have very.
I would say actually more,
Actually
it's,
evaluated as effective.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that, because we can all say it, but then if someone says, where's the
Well, in terms
evaluation?
of demonstrating interest, continuing interest.
I have the evaluation.
Well, that's what I said. Well, that's good. That's what I said. That's, I think it's important to have evidence as opposed to just say, somebody say, well, it's a great program.
I would actually say a bit more here, more than Saturday Academy, it's not on my and for
And we don't hear, we don't
High
tech youth.
I'll tell you, the number one.
Yes, high tech youth is going on.
Because they had such a culturally, they had a strategy for reaching out to students where they would meet up with parents and the whole campaign, reach out to the parents. It was really,
But we don't know.
Well, high tech youth stuff also is actually teachers.
Even
We know that programs can produce results. We don't know yet whether these specific grant programs that we're going to produce results because of the evaluation. So we can say that there are programs that have produced results. The whole purpose of this is to find additional programs that beyond what we already know work.
Or expand programs that
Expand
are
programs
new.
that work, so there's that kind of flavor.
So what if we took this tack? We could say, we do have national data on the impact of out-of-school experience, free choice learning environments, where it's something like 85% of people in STEM careers were highly influenced or more influenced by the out-of-school programming. It's an insanely high number. You know.
And you gotta discount the school system either. I mean, it's,
Well,
I mean, because
there's
the
a
schools aren't meeting the
significant
needs.
number who it was a teacher as well, so, or a science
Yeah,
teacher.
well, one teacher out of the 35 that I had. You know, it's good odds, but so we can do it in a way that doesn't totally diss the K-12 system.
Yeah, I don't want to do that, because we're saying we want to incorporate some of this into the school system too, some of these stuff.
Sure. So is there evidence that some of these programs have moved from after-school programs into school systems? So that's,
I wouldn't say they've moved because they've expanded, right? Because it's not like you get rid of the robotics team. You now have a class in
right.
robotics.
So it
Yeah.
becomes incorporated into the
Do they get a grade?
The robotics class, yeah. And often there's like a class that not everybody's on the team.
Yeah.
So if the class, the ethics class had already been in the school day, would that have been a problem?
But you couldn't get the principals or the administrators to actually put it into the curriculum schedule until you generate interest. So they
So this is
generated
a psychological,
interest,
okay,
then
this
it
is
came
a
in.
maneuver.
So it's, right, so at least that's what I'm assuming happened. It's like, yeah, you want to run an after-school robotics, fine, you know. Okay, you can use the gym.
At arm's length.
Yeah. But then when they see it works. So if you have data on some of those programs where that's happened, whether it's over time, whether it's robotics or if we're aware of that, or from where it's where computer science
Getting
then
project challenge, but that's a continuing thing because there's trouble getting
yeah, that's a different area.
in.
But anything that started sort of as this complementary program that worked into the institutionalization of
Could a
programming.
grant program be teaching the teachers to teach? Is that part of a grant program?
We've done that.
I mean, because, as you said, you're a shortage of teachers, so couldn't a grant program be where you have shortage of teachers to be able to offer programs in a underserved population area to train them or something?
Yeah, we'd like to see that through our STEM hubs, but I can see that being, I mean, teacher capacity building is huge.
So it could be part of that, as much as a program, it could be a program around. This program is meant to do this. If you want to expand robotics, you want to teach the teachers how to, for those who don't have that skill, because you're not going to change it.
What we need, so let's just say community college B out in the middle of nowhere needs welding.
Yeah.
That's right. And so, and for what we do
$1 million
is
to use to buy and build welding equipment, set up
Just
the lab,
standards now.
start up the classes, and start offering certificates in wellness so everybody gets to come in out of high schools. And do that. When you do get that grant,
And it's the only place it happens. It does happen. And they actually let some of the teachers bring one robotics kid to the class as well.
So I want to also say, you know, for that, because I think it's really easy to assume that there's a lot of challenges in terms of
that's what you would hope.
in education. And I don't think that
The
is
process
true
is
overall.
that if you just
There
give
are
them
pockets
$1
of
million,
that. I think that
they really don't have the
the
discipline to do that.
you know, the leveling up and supporting teachers who are great teachers, but fiscally and with time, I think we could do some other things within the system to
Find out what
actually
the general
encourage greater degree of quality that aren't just programming pieces or teacher pieces. There's a lot of other constraints for the system. So there's addressing those kinds of needs and partnering with industry to support educators. I want it to be a supportive, our language is support educators. It's not fix them.
No, I
That's not the wrong, right thing,
But if
right?
you wanted to offer a robotics program, and there's a teacher who's interested, he or she needs some background education,
Yeah.
how to do it, work, how to develop a program. Stipends, yeah. The tools.
Yeah,
Right,
right.
and tools and equipment and all things you need. So, you know, I could see teachers saying, that'd be really cool, but I don't really know how to do it, but I'm willing to learn. Right. Help me, you know. Right. You have to have math too. That stipend would help you. If they paid the coach a soccer team, it's probably equally, it's equally as valuable, if not more valuable.
Why are the schools producing, and they're not, as obvious aren't going enough to cost.
At this last meeting,
I got the grant, thought it was a wonderful idea, and, but they really need time.
There's not enough education.
Project management skills to bring it back to
Advertising,
marketing,
marketing, and not to mention the math anxiety to be able to open that big door. And so there should be hundreds, if the education is right, there should be.
All right, let's move on to this. So we think there's a lot of evidence that grant programs can be looked into a system of dramatic
In 2017.
And again, it depends on how you manage this program. If they're one-offs, if they're disconnected, it's not going to make a decision.
They don't break
It's up to
down
the boss.
necessarily aware of that. They can tell a kid, oh, you want to do that? Yeah, wait, let me
Well, that's, and that's part of the issue. College advisor, I used to run a college advisor in higher ed, but that's part of the issue, it's just the education. Really going to be talking to students about making some major decisions. Make some major decisions pretty quickly right out of the chute. Financial aid won't let you dawdle very much. Remember when we had to actually decide when it was going to be?
Well, my junior year.
That's not happening.
This is the mod.
We're not pressing. So I continue to believe that we're not doing enough with education.
What if there would be one need for community colleges to set up classes for teachers? Not even necessarily just like a whole one thing, but a special class for teachers. This technology, this technology. That they
Like a
can use
workshop.
for, and then they have some knowledge for projects.
Yeah, I think that sort of teacher professional learning opportunities would be phenomenal.
Our teachers as well as knowing the content.
And gee, wouldn't it be great if they could actually back
Below that's
more knowledge
the top
for
Well,
developing those skill sets.
teachers do need continuing credit to keep their certificates, so tying it into their
Just refine it down. Let's go talk to the TA.
That sounds like a really good hub.
Yeah, it is community college and industry partnerships alongside. So what I don't want this pipeline is to fall into the traditional post-secondary. Yes. So honestly, the impact, we're building interest to feed the right? Closing the achievement gap is what we're trying to do.
You're increasing the capacity for the pipe to be effective.
Well, the impact is more jobs, more kids.
And more interested, right? So we want them to understand the content, but we want them to help parents motivated, right? Because
We don't want to be scrapped out.
we want them to also understand career choices, career and academic choices.
Tell he's a production guy.
So is this asking for
2 years in.
Kids want to go HSU to try to create.
the percentage
Okay, you guys are all talking about the product you're into. Talk about the dissemination and expertise and the practices. We're also talking about the pipe itself.
And the industry is to
Not just what
the
they
conversation and the fund itself.
To me, if there's just one more,
Direct conversation, and the industry folks are writing about their specific needs and evaluating proposals, and so it starts the conversation at this point.
Better. As someone said,
here's your results you're trying to achieve.
More than one.
Engineering wise.
Oh, yeah, but-
This is what I'm trying to achieve, which is.
We scrapped it.
I need to write it.
You can't answer any of those questions. None of us are remotely qualified to answer a single question on any issues. You give me a professional educator who actually knows what the OEIB. Yeah, there is absolutely no way anybody out there can answer questions. No, I'm just saying. What I would love to do is get somebody, if we presented the idea and the concept to somebody who's in the inside, they could very easily use the education speak to lay out what what the OEIB wants to hear. Because right now, I can tell you it's not happening. So what we're doing is refining the proposal to be tight. So that when we make that pitch, then it's, somebody could easily
Yeah,
do
if you
that.
guys could focus on pitch and messaging then around it and proceed that.
I just wanted to see if you guys, I mean, we can,
That'd be great.
yeah, as opposed to put
that-
one-word answers on there.
Yeah, I think that's it. The money is so good at being
Spreading that word around, scrap.
wider. It will bring people together and.
So if you thought about impact as X, what is the impact of grants on the X you're trying to achieve? You're talking about impact, percentage of impact, or is it a significant impact on the result, or is it? I don't know if that's what you're trying to answer here. Because the impact is this a big impact on making this result happen, or is this a small impact on making this? Is that a small impact? If I'm trying to get more STEM degrees, is this grant program 80% of this? Without the grant program, it ain't gonna happen. Or is it just?
Yeah.
Well, but that's what I think they're asking. This is a big impact then on whether this is gonna happen.
I think students' motivation.
So if we're saying we need more degrees, more whatever our results are, without a grant program has an 80% impact.
I think
Or a substantial.
Substantial impact. I'm just trying to look at it as a minor thing. Somebody could say, well, I don't need to do this because it just has a minor impact on the results. If it's substantial, then without it, I can't get the results. And then they'll say, why is that? And then it's your speech about why. Because they don't have an interest, they don't see a purpose, they don't have a feeling. You're never going to get there. I don't care how much you throw them in the education system. Teaching kids differently. So I think you say it has a substantial impact
And so
on the results.
we have examples of that from all this is from
Research you already have.
to do the innovation. It's just you have to really make whatever the process is.
Well, we know that the student motivation is the biggest
So I
piece,
think-
so
so I think
if
it's
you
easier to
address
measure
student
that.
motivation and interest, then you've done it, so not for everybody, and there's other
I
opportunities.
would say the grant program, any one grant program has a moderate impact, because if you get the kid all fired up about robotics, and they age out of the robotics program in the community, and the next really cool program, theater program, you know, you may have lost it, that's okay.
Especially if they stay engaged in school. Because
If they stay engaged in school because of it, but it really, it's moving through the entire ecosystem with having multiple opportunities to do STEM, to personalize it, to have it real for them.
I know this is better at the local level, but maybe if there's any way this can be encouraged, I think kids need to be required to say in middle school, public school kids, everyone. So they get to taste it. Nobody's going to all get a chance. So they're not self-selecting themselves without even trying.
One of the things we're past that
Institutionalized to the point, institutionalized to the required. Yes, exploratory.
Maybe like a middle school CTE, or that has the requirements and the life physical, other stuff, engineering, but also.
I don't think you need to limit it at the middle school to CTE, because it can be totally exploratory STEM, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking of
Serious science research.
Carnegie kind of things, making sure that within our current system, right? So how does it fit within our current system in a way that then becomes disruptive?
I'm thinking of the old industry on parade stuff, days that we were kids, you can see how things were made and how things were done, you know. That was fun. This one, you know, we actually had some it's cool. Yeah. It's a little old now, but it's
Additional sports or changes needed for the strategy to be successful?
So I heard you talking about, I don't know, this, I'm not sure this is an Asian, I heard you talking about the importance of feedback. That person wasn't there and engaged, and that's so absolutely.
So I can tell you, I have an
Well,
upgrade in
and
my
first,
office.
I think
So
two things you need. One is you need
Marcia
a
went
system to be able to
and all
administer
her
it. You gotta have a way to, you gotta have a way to measure it, and then you gotta have the hubs to disseminate it. So I think there's three key conditions all tied in our strategy. If you don't have the backbone to do it, you don't have the measurements to measure it, and then you don't have
And it was getting on a shared software platform. It was creating a system where it was a one-stop shop across the state for all the state owners. One-stop shop
Yes,
across the
self
state for
supervisor,
all
not
the
created equal.
The second part of that is supporting business to actually do those positions. Well, we committed that to the hex, so, you know, I don't know if the hex will take it on, but there are mechanisms, there are people trying to do that kind of thing on the education
Is there
side.
anything
And
else?
they're trying to do outreach.
Is there alignment with
to make
the
it valid.
CTE
So it's
staff
like, I
for
don't
this
know
one?
whether it falls so much of the STEM thing, or whether this is a policy thing for this group to say to like a heck or others that are looking at the same. We want to make sure some level of literacy.
Right.
Yeah.
You're still on.
Some mechanism for educating students. Yeah.
That's a supportive, it's not a requirement for it to be successful. And it could exist with or without.
I'm sure you're gonna bet this in everything, but.
Nope. No idea.
They have no idea where they go or.
Nope.
Not at all.
So to access has to be part of it.
I know they do it, because they have their, they have the rates, they're putting the rates up there.
And the TM program reports
screens and
it. Johnson knows exactly where it's
selection process.
at.
So we would have to ask the that like we do in our foundation. Color do you serve, women do you serve?
How do you get
Well, and the programming gets developed very specifically.
Sometimes that involves paying for things that may seem silly. Paying for a meal that includes all parents, being ready to include in your definition of family somebody besides mom or dad. Paying to go
What's the
We went to a school out of Highlands Park, it's Sun School. They do, the STEM education, it's food.
I can tell you what the wages are for.
All right.
What'd you call it?
It's just what they do their business to know where everybody's employed.
Yeah, I just said it includes background data.
I can tell you what's data. But when we went to the universities and said, oh, by the way, we have the activity, like, oh, you can get the data. And we said, yeah, we can. And that was since 2010. And they were like, well.
You mentioned that, I think what their success has been, they've been able to kind of pull the native together. Portland, so diverse within its own set.
You can do that. There you go. There's a lot of data.
Different income levels, different living area, different. So they've been able to kind of coalesce.
And the only ones who do are the ones that care about the numbers.
Right. And then from there, they're able to say,
Well,
yeah,
Oregon Tech does.
we as a native community can do this.
Look at that, electronics engineers, climate qual, 99.9%. For the last 10 years, I've gotten 95 of them.
So is there any, just from my Instagram ask,
They come in market anyway, they go, oh, you're a W, you did a great job, and they don't provide data, and then they do that, and they still market it, so, oh, and
the fact that we're spending more money on the population.
But with that said, I really like the quiet and quiet.
Not yet, no lawsuits.
Yeah, you see, and so,
That's fine, I just want to make sure there wasn't anything there.
No, there's some other things though, school access is just access in general. There's background checks necessary, there's, if it's in school programming, then it has to be educated, during the school day.
We're gonna have to resolve that, make choices based on.
That's a requirement of Washington.
And what that's the best, they're shocking.
Policy for activities, the purpose funding for CTE.
I remember hearing about that a few months ago.
We would forget about our STEM grants, and those would all go into CTE. But I think schools are not, there's broader
Is that where the STEM money, the CTE money is coming from? It's coming from the federal government? From the
There's
state?
some. The state is
Well, that's a liberal, that's a very fair liberal arts attitude.
title something.
We are talking about very, don't get to be an engineer unless you get an engineer. It's just like education.
So,
Education, you don't get
not
to
for
teach.
this.
Right? So you should be able to attract this.
I guess I'm not we got the
43. Salaries they get, and students can go on and they can go, wow, if I go to this school, what's all the is this where alignment Texas and it's there for the student, and Texas does some cool stuff. I'm like, I just want to call Texas. I want to call Texas having a cool borrow your system and just, not like everyone to go to Arrow, but use their system and just put our data in and then we can get in.
Texas has 30, 40.
Right. They got there somehow.
Yeah, so there's some conditions for greater success, right?
And it's the chicken egg, right? The wagon.
Not the weather.
They have those type industries because of this, that's not all over. I mean,
What we're talking about is
320.
Yep. What do you need from other agencies, boards, or groups to enable it to be most effective?
What's the outcome after
Do you need anything else there?
It's like the industry impact.
Don't you need some cross-pollination with early learning, with workforce investment board?
Stuff to that is how 8th grade is called.
Well, that's,
Communication strategy.
there is a communication component to our longer term complementary initiatives. Is I'm talking to the STEM Employers Coalition
And that
and
we talked
Comcast about
early on when we
doing a
first got the circle about new jobs, and we said that new jobs aren't necessarily going to be
STEM
created by
Employers
the
Coalition
out
did not sunset
here, and
benefits of
entrepreneurs aren't going to be
We've asked them to,
But new
I've
jobs
asked
are
them
created
to
by
file
attracting businesses, and that
to
made me think of
reconstitute
when
them.
you talk about Texas having so many, the industry to support the university system and vice versa, where they came first. Were those industries attracted to Texas because they had the workforce, they were graduating from the universities, or were the workforce there because of the industry, But we should talk about attracting new business to Oregon through this initiative as well.
Yeah, it's not gonna, they're not gonna get grants.
Yeah, but you're right, it's an industry for marketing and human capital, right?
And is it Earl? Dwayne?
Like one string travel. Selected No, that's through their economic development.
Helping small businesses get started the similar way.
Kind of collaboration with that group and try. Can lead something there.
Over the summer, can we set up some times to meet with,
Yeah, and then this
some of the tribal communities to better understand how they're thinking about STEM and whether it's,
Yeah, they're probably just, we want industry to come in and work with us on a pilot. not thinking
Oh,
about
okay,
it.
she's saying,
They're thinking jobs, but how to get to them.
Ready to go.
So what are we trying to do? We're trying to figure out strategic gap,
And your
increase in
agency offers other parts of the system to aid alignment and transformation. We can support CTE, we can support early learning,
We're trying to take away the
we can
barriers.
support the accelerated learning initiative,
This is a really
dual credit
funny for me because I spent the last
learning, we get developmental plan.
And I would like to focus on the
Relevant.
There's so many things that we can support right now. There's math in general, yeah.
If you want
delivery of things that I was
The
seeing.
implementation of the next gen.
Those ideas
and
become
common
yes,
core.
all of the
going into
industry
law,
outcomes
being
are there.
implemented,
You know what I mean? Instead of saying like,
and then
New science and math.
I would legislate for it.
it's
all
true.
of the
Yeah.
Exactly. And what's
that phrase project-based seemed to be such a big STEM thing. That's what's come up.
Oh, we just assumed that.
You just assume that, okay.
No, those were our earliest discussions that there's, through the department, maybe what we need to do, and we do need to do this, is in the context of our strategic plan, that vision for this really applied, learning is,
Project-based implications of things that you need, of things that, yeah, that's one, yes. Things you might need, or things you might do, yes. Aid in kids being able to do the project.
One of my colleagues said we should.
but there are some issues, some
It's the
change,
word credential.
quick questions, so if we're doing internships, for example, insurance for companies, on a manufacturing floor, is a big one, right?
Are you trying to create another council?
Well, this is a council.
I saw an interesting presentation by a professor at OSU who's developed a lab where it's, instead he called it embedded assessment. So they would go in and they would solve the problem. In this case, it was fabricating or growing a silicon wafer.
I wouldn't put it in the title.
And instead of being graded on success, did it in so much time. They actually did it on a curve. They looked at, okay, you saved money here, you got it done at the highest quality. And then they brought in industry experts and said, you guys try it. And then they brought them in to see. Some of the students did as well or better than industry experts.
But it's not in the title right now.
Yeah, he was, instead of grading on A or B or whatever, they looked at how well he did just in the general curve. If he took everybody and just said, how did you do? So I got to find the name, like, I can't remember his name. He said he was trying to implement that approach in high school. I forgot which
No, we've got 15
They were
minutes.
given it as a project. Build the highest quality wafer.
What gets the groups together
It was on college level.
velocity so that they have to deal with these issues?
It's actually a good process to go through these questions, we'll just see what the actions are.
Yeah.
Tapped out, heads are back to the
Strategic would be another word for
Strategic, because that gets at the current and also.
Which professional group it did? They did one
Sounds like a well set up. And strategic is like what we need right now, but also the job.
So especially find out the skill trades. The skill trades is what I want.
Fill the current jobs, but we also want to
key, critical, essential, imperative.
adaptive talent development.
So it was STE was
Would you
developed.
call it STEM? STEM talent?
You know what's interesting is that
You made a difference.
We do, we just hired.
No, but I meant globally, we see women in trades, it's a real challenge.
So what support do you need from
Yeah,
our agencies?
so there's the center.
So what support does the STEM count investment make?
The college and the university.
Pilot and choose for the
I just don't worry about that.
We're doing that with Foley.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they had a highway. Help them get a
So everybody doesn't hardly any
daycare.
I'm sure that's a compliment. So I'm just gonna go away right now.
A practice we're developing.
That's very many that have these.
But it's really helpful to help
They're
them
actually
get through
helping
the
mentorships.
And once
So it's not groups you'd expect it, right?
All right, everybody's rebelled except this group.
I should have been more closely monitoring. We just touched we're whether or not we
learn to call out here. Repurposing resources in our agency, that's we're not doing that, but key partnerships, public input is no problem. We've been doing it through these, STEM Leadership Summit. So that's fine. I just stick around. Key partners, stakeholders, community groups, I'm good with the RACs, key partner as well. The WIPs,
Yes.
the regional teams, regional collaboratives. This last one is really fun.
Then you gotta run through the
Share. And pay to share.
So you're gonna do one of these for all three strategies, basically?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to. Unfortunately, the ones that I've seen go in front of the outcomes investment are these non-systemic transformations, like we're trying. They're, we want all-day kindergarten. So it's like this. Well, I mean, it's a huge ask, but it's one strategy. Whereas this is, that's all right. We're going to get support for this. I don't know what level of support, but.
It's getting late, and it's really gonna be.
Or else we'll all be looking at new jobs.
Well, it's putting it back on them in terms of whether the economic outcomes that they want for the state. Do they really want to achieve these things? Do we want to continue to be 46th in the nation? You know, in terms of math and science, what's our economic growth?
Required Oregon talent.
So if this doesn't resonate with their governor, I'm counting on you to meet with them.
But it's some plug. The cost of the prison system.
Yeah.
That's.
Well, exactly.
I mean, you don't get this.
So is there concerns with the legislature?
And by the way, it would really help to have these start saving somewhere else. Healthcare. That would be nice.
Bringing healthcare.
Okay.
He does, he talks about.
Colleges.
He was addressing, he was working with frogs or something like that when he was a kid. You know, just really digging into things and
That's what's
really attracted to
Repeat
medicine. Yeah.
small
It's
critters
all
apart.
STEM. So he's just all that to say, he's got stories about it.
realistically.
Okay, let's all come on back to the table. See where we stand.
Help them advise them.
Yeah.
That got national attention. Pull over.
It was fun.
Let's do very brief processing.
Yeah, just,
you know, but then have people provide me with that input.
Yeah. Okay, Dwayne, come on, we gotta regroup. I know you guys talk a lot.
Yeah, Donna.
We went rouge
Donna,
on
you
you.
can,
We went rouge on you.
Kyle, I expect you to corral this guy.
No, I mean, I'm sorry, you can't answer. I am sorry.
I can.
Yeah, but you're a professional at this. I mean,
I could answer that around that.
This is what I can't do. I can't put the language on the paper. I could explain how our program would deal with those things. But to put the language
Different
on
questions.
paper.
Different questions.
Yes.
Yep, I agree.
I need
have
somebody who knows
no
the.
problem. So I may be coming to you guys to hash out the messaging around this.
Okay,
I
let's
mean,
go.
in general,
Aubrey,
we need to do a
Dwayne.
legislative
Who else we
strategy
got out
with
there?
Duncan really soon.
We met with Duncan here a couple days ago.
Did you talk to him about the marketing?
I did. Did you do?
Is he tepid?
He always did.
Did he see those spots? Did he see the creatives?
No, he didn't. The design is.
I'll send you the YouTube links.
Yeah. I think it's well, we got off topic a little bit. I just want to make sure that we get.
I know, but this isn't the one. Well, that's going to make a bigger change than this if we do it well. We'll tag him. All right. I'm in. I'm in.
3 hours. Yeah.
Because I need him to go to the governor.
Can we go to the restroom, or you want everybody here right now?
If you have to go, if you have to go, go, because you're not going to have attention here.
That's cool.
That way, and the men's is actually back in the.
All the way straight back.
It's
Yeah,
right
to the
over
left.
that.
Yeah, to your left, right by the.
It's a weird place.
auditorium, Yeah.
What's that?
You get lost going to the men's room.
Oh, it's like,
Yeah, I know.
Where are you?
Exactly.
I did a seminar in this building. Actually, yeah, in this room here.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. We're in a good place.
We're in a good place. Okay. We got the strategies right. We got the plan right. We just got to write up
I'm wondering if
the.
we're, I don't mind. I'm wondering if people are going to perceive us as biting off more than we can chew right now. So we don't have a track record, and we're making a $50 million ask. Great. So we may decouple the CTE just to make it a smaller ask.
Yeah.
You know, so that.
Put it as an option package.
Well, let's just put it as a complimentary.
Yes, I said it's kind of
Yeah,
like something you
it's
could
like-
do. It doesn't require, but it's.
Well, it just adds to the level of shit that we have to explain.
That's right.
You know, how is
Why
that
you
going to
doing that?
function together? What is the impact? Where'd you find
Where'd you get that?
It's good
There's
when
a-
other people are having events because I'll just go steal.
There's other events out there.
I'll be back. I'll borrow.
They have cocktails.
We're not too far from Patty's.
We got to do that someday.
Anytime.
That'd be fun. Are we going to have our retreat at your house, I hear?
Look, we could do that. We could do that on the river. Summertime. We could do that.
Well, we do need to talk about whether or not, I'm not sure that we need another council
Yeah,
meeting
yeah.
in July.
Yeah.
I don't. Do you?
Say
Or
like-
August?
I don't.
Not if you're just framing, all you have to get done in July is give them a framework at the top level and ask them.
We do need a legislative strategy in September then.
Oh, I need one.
Yeah, we need one earlier. Yeah.
If everybody's teed up and wanting one, I have to, just so you know, I have a slot in September in front of higher ed.
Do you?
I'm supposed to lay out the legislative strategy for,
At higher ed?
because it's not officially dead until
Okay.
the full session.
Well, let's put it in as this third.
The third piece, what's interesting is, can we create all three pieces independently
In case.
in case, and then just wrap it all up at the highest level?
Part of a cake out there too, like.
Yeah, come on, Mark, come on. You know, we have to actually beg off of other people's food.
I can't believe you guys are scrounging off of other people's food.
I'm not proud. I should say
I have
I'm
it in
not
my
proud when I'm hungry. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Sorry, the
Aubrey's back there, we're good.
It's cake, but it's, I didn't figure that.
That was a little messy.
Just grab the whole.
The punchy Friday
flood
after.
it in here.
Is it Thursday or Friday?
Thursday.
Oh, God.
Okay, let's go ahead and get back together and
do it.
kind of just do a quick debrief. So who's gonna, maybe just go around each group, you wanna do a spokesman for each group, just kind of say what you talk about, just what's the learning here, and obviously you all went different directions, as we always know this group is capable of doing. So who wants to talk about start with the hubs, who did the hubs? And someone could just take what
Aubrey
the
has our notes.
Bus?
teacher ate the dog ate the homework.
Slap me
Because I scribe, you talk.
Oh.
Just talk a little bit about, talk a little bit about what you talked
Fair
about.
enough.
Yeah.
Huh. That's not fair.
I said fair enough.
Wish that cookie was bigger, don't you?
Don't choke on us.
For a little while.
That's right, he's gonna chew for a while.
Okay.
2 minutes or less.
I'll bring one of the salient points out that we came up with, and that is that if we're looking at the hubs as one of our primary vehicles for delivering our outcomes in the community, that the relationship between us and the people that are running the hub is going to be very key. So we were wondering what the relationship would look like, and we're thinking that we need to kind of define what that looks like and have measures not only just for the outcomes of the individual groups, but the individuals running those groups too as a possibility. So, and you know, from my venture background, looking at, if I were looking at this as an investor,
Yep.
what type of relationships do we need to have, how we support those groups of people or the individuals that are running those hubs, what type of help do we give them in being able to have the right skill set, to be able to interact with each other and be able to share the
Is
outcomes.
that all written?
She wrote all this down in one 2 lines. It was
It's
great.
a bullet, it's a bullet point.
Exactly, like you asked for.
No, that's perfect.
So that's one of the points.
And you know the reference, Mark.
It's being recorded.
No,
right here.
absolutely. No, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and another thing is that is around equity. And the hubs and the funding and support of those hubs are really key to having equitable solutions everywhere. Because we can deploy dollars through the grants, we can deploy dollars through the other vehicles, and have a very inequitable outcomes from that. Whereas the hubs are the means for building the collaborative communities that we would like to have, the vehicle for best practices being connected, the opportunities for organizations that may not have known that there were gaps in particular parts of a hub area, for example, to be able to find those areas and then deploy resources against that as well. So we see this as really, the hub piece is a big deal.
It is. I agree.
How'd I do?
So there's nothing in your guys' conversation that suggests this is still not a good, solid strategy, right? It's not. Okay.
It's solid. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's good. SEC group. I guess we're the grants group. Just to do that.
Just need more of them, right?
Yeah.
All the hubs, or do you need it?
You need to be effective.
You need them to be effective.
Yeah,
So there's
right.
a huge capacity building piece. There's clarity that we need to offer about what their roles and the expectations, the outcomes are.
Who they're
We need-
reporting to and who that backbone structure is, I think.
Who that background structure is,
This
and
goes down to the ultimate
governance, et cetera.
accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're concerned because we're not seeing what that accountability infrastructure looks like yet.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely essential both for that, on the leadership level, there's really 3 dimensions: the leadership within those hubs, the equity piece of it, the consistency of the application of that equity lens within that, and third is the leverage of the assets. There has to be that's a very critical piece of that. We have to be very strategic. We are, as investors, we are investing in developing assets, but those assets will need to be leveraged and very intentionally leveraged, and that we need to hold ourselves accountable for the leveraging of the assets.
Oh, one more piece, and that is that the way the grants were rolled out before made the hubs look or structure themselves like program delivery vehicles.
Yeah.
And recognizing that that's not really what we want them to be. They're really more intermediaries that can collect and manage the assets in their area, and then be able to be the consistent vehicles that our measures and outcomes flow through. Right. So we need to empower them to do that. And not make them try to have to deliver programs, because there are other people who do a very good job of that.
But they're also a dissemination, point of dissemination of information too.
Information and aligning
And
resources.
unfortunately, there was a 3-week turnaround, so that needs to change. I mean, there's money. Oh, we gotta get out the door, and we don't take the time to be thoughtful about what we're asking them to do. So we just remain the same, just give us some programs, tell us how you're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Just keeping the same problems.
It'll be very interesting in a year and a half time to actually reflect on, go back to the language of the RFP and see how people's perceptions of that RFP are changed. Because I think we were pretty clear. But I think there's some historical stuff going on in that. Anyway, I'm not defending it, but I think you're absolutely right. Attending to the roles of the hubs is going to be critical. What sort of support is necessary? And that evaluation framework and the accountability pieces. Because I like the idea of if we're investing in this, we need to really understand about asset development as well, and leveraging their local assets in that process. So, thank you on that.
Well, not only leveraging their local assets, but leveraging the assets that are developed into the entire state.
Mhm.
So it's the scale
Right.
of that.
scaling what they're. Great.
Okay. Good
Thanks.
information. Let's see, on the grant program, I'll try to see if I can summarize quickly. We had a great conversation. We actually tried to follow the homework assignment, but we had a lot. We had a homer on our team who actually knew some of the answers to that. We had 2 homers, you know, people understand the system. But clearly, the grant program needs to have a backbone to be able to administer it. It needs to have the ability to measure results, and then it has to have the ability to push that out, or else it's not worth doing the grant. So it was pretty clear that grant program by itself is a loser without the hubs and a way to measure and evaluate what we've got. So that was really important. We did talk, and this is something we need to get feedback from you all. We said, where should we focus the grants on? We said the continuum, K through or preschool to 14, K through 14, I think is what we said.
P14.
P through 14. The question really is, where can we be most effective now? And we tended to focus, not agreement, but P through 8 probably is our better focus area for grant programs, the younger population where we need to create the interest in the program, as opposed to the later years where maybe CTE would be the better place for money to be spent. So we kind of centered on that, and we'll try to think about why that makes sense. But focus on that. It wouldn't eliminate it, but it'd be focused. And then on the equity lens, we try to focus on the underserved population, not trying to discriminate between women or children of color, but really try to say where are the areas that are underserved. And we talked about maybe 75% of the dollars in the grant program would go towards the underserved population. That's a big number, but we're talking about women and children of color, and that seems to be the areas that we really need to bolster if we're going to have successes. So we just picked the number, wanted to make clear about it, but we thought we needed to address the equity and where the money would go to, and really trying to look at this area of underserved population without getting very prescriptive beyond that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't think you can answer it, Jen, so I'll direct it at Mark and probably Jamie. The CTE funds that come through, whether it's federal money distributed by ODE, are any of those dollars specifically for professional development? Because we talk a lot about professional development too, and I just, from Tuesday's meeting, it was like, one of our problems is the teachers.
Well,
so is there a focus on teachers?
In terms of teacher recruitment and teacher development for that, I'm going to defer to Laura Roach, who heads the ODE's CTE work.
So the federal dollars do allow for, our leadership dollars do allow for professional development of teachers, of students who are enrolled in CTE. So, and there's not a ton of money, there's some money. It varies from year to year depending on what staff costs are. So the answer is yes. We do it. We've done math in CTE for 5 or 6 years. We've done literacy in CTE. We worked on Common Core standards in CTE and assessments. So the answer is yes. But it's primarily for teachers of CTE. We did do a program last year of training academic teachers to teach in context. But it's not a ton of money.
And most of them are pure program dollars, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's called leadership money for us.
Yeah.
So, $50,000 here, or, 60 or 100,000. 100,000 would be the max we would ever have if we had that.
We did have a conversation around grant programs addressing the teacher issue, though. That would not preclude teacher education as part of the.
Is there any status on re-energizing the CTE teaching program at OSU or any of those places to create new?
There's a lot of interest.
Okay.
There is I don't know about what OSU is planning. There is Representative Reardon is conducting a work group this summer around teacher licensure for CTE teachers.
Yeah.
I don't know. It has a university representative.
Yeah, and from the field, we're hearing that, particularly for career changers, how are they accessing courses in order to actually get certified? So we're pushing out CTE revitalization dollars, but then the principals can't find people who have the skill sets and currency, in terms of high-tech manufacturing, to actually teach high-tech manufacturing in a secondary environment.
All the school districts around whatever school is going to have the program have to have programs so that the teachers can go out and actually try it,
Yeah, there's a
So
lot there.
is there a focus somewhere that I just missed? I mean,
On.
is that somewhere in here?
For,
Just the teacher PD and getting teachers prepared and identifying the right teachers to deliver this stuff, because you can fund the programs, but if there's not teachers that are capable of delivering it.
those would be program support, right now, that, what was included in the statewide STEM network were aligned programming around teacher professional development. That would be a focus of a hub.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is two things. And I originally had in the hubs all program dollars decoupled from the backbone dollars, because I think they're really separate functionalities of a hub, and we have bred a lot of confusion in the hubs by linking them from day one. One is the state's role in providing funding to the hubs is for the capacity of the hub to exist and to be effective and to align these efforts. That's really hard to ask communities to come up with those dollars. The other side for programming is that we can use the dollars to incent different programming, like teacher professional learning or development, or like internships, or like, we can tie other program dollars to the activities of the hubs. But the hubs themselves wouldn't deliver, as somebody said. You'd go to your local service provider, or, whether that's a local service provider or a state service provider, there's capacity over here in the state. You can access that through other means. So I still like the idea of decoupling it, but then that puts more dollars into, it can confuse this piece of paper, which I don't care about. We can confuse it, but
As long as it's not lost, it's just stuck with me, since that's what we heard, you
Need to
gotta have
educate
teachers, and
teachers.
it needs to be somewhere.
We need to
Somebody
focus on
needs-
teacher professional
somebody
learning
needs to be
somewhere, and it
focused.
has to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and just to add to what Aubrey's bringing up, the other folks that influence where the kids in K-12 go, so counselors and those things. I see STEM career awareness as a board over here.
Yeah.
We don't have people educated at the level we should for encouraging STEM pathways and having all the right information to even guide kids that direction. And
That's
so I don't know where
a good point.
We should put that somewhere.
It's actually taking place, so maybe that's why I wasn't too worried about it. But there's right now through career and college readiness work.
There are dozens of really bad STEM-related traps out there for kids choosing degrees and pathways. That if you go get a biology degree, which is very popular, and you stop at a BS degree in biology, you're going to be making $9 an hour.
Barista.
Yeah,
Barista.
somewhere. I mean, there's a number of traps. We were talking about vet techs as an associate's degree, right? There's 600 produced a year and 2 openings. That we've got to make sure.
Is that in the CTE pathways work? Is that the problem, or what?
Well, this was
from?
some stats coming from Laura, so I don't know where she's getting it. But the idea is that, and I've heard it over and over again, there are not all STEM degrees are created equally in regards to where the actual employment opportunities are.
Yep.
So you got to get that early, so kids aren't setting up expectations that are.
And I've run into a number of situations with actual college students at the college level who are taking more classes than they need to, finding out after the fact, in order to then go on to get a degree. And whoever it is that's counseling them, it's confusing from what I can tell. And it's like real money getting spent by folks getting frustrated who eventually just stop, right, and don't get their AA. So I don't know how to tackle that, Mark, but I just think something has to come up.
I wonder if part of it's
There's
in a
some marketing
CTE
piece.
pathways with CCWD, right, Louise?
Part of that issue, I don't know if I can speak.
Yeah, please speak,
Yeah, it's like protocol, but part of that issue is,
Yeah.
in terms of the extra classes, is just the placement level of students. And so they're not too happy having to take, in some cases, 3 to 4 to 5 terms of preparatory course, pre-college coursework before they get that. But a huge issue is also the education of our college staff and advising staff at various levels. Could be it's high school 2-year and 4-year, in terms of getting them in the straightest line from point A to point B in CTE related programs. So that's
Yeah.
I think we need to invest something.
I think yeah.
I think
Yeah.
raising the awareness at the high school level around career guidance is incredibly important. We have some high schools that have one counselor to 500 students.
Yeah.
And for them to understand what each of the universities offers, and if they want to do these kinds of jobs, they need to go here. I mean, I don't know how that person.
There are some online stuff that the career information system is pretty accurate, as far as I understand. They have great connections, or are supposed to have connections with the employment department and directly tie to those, as well as understand the programming. Now, if that's not true, then we need to suss that out.
It may
So.
be true, but I think there's a lack of communication in what ODE has to offer and what the career and college and readiness and all that stuff that individual districts
Right.
are working on.
Yeah.
There's just not a share.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's move
So
on.
public-
We're gonna run. We got one more.
Oh,
one more thing.
Okay.
Post-secondary. Who's
Well,
there?
between the two of us, I think the advantage the post-secondary piece has is it's the most tightly coupled with a very specific outcome. It's pretty narrow on what our spotlight would be, and therefore coupling it with other types of outcomes around equity and region and those kinds of things become pretty, I won't say easy, but it becomes pretty direct, and the methods in which you can do that are pretty well known, and putting that type of language and requirements in different types of proposals and RFPs that go out to the schools to implement. But we focused mostly on just cleaning up our proposal and working on the name of it. We don't like post-secondary responsiveness.
Yeah.
There's a new acronym or two that's being kicked around focusing on the fact that this is a place where industry has a very high impact, that it's a strategic effort, that it's about developing a pipeline of talent. So we don't have the acronym, or what was the last one?
Well, it comes down to, if stepping back a minute, we were trying to not make this look like a silo of post-secondary here, but think about the continuum that the council's worked so hard to try to facilitate. It was more like strategic talent advancement. But there was also words like critical needs, industry guided, adaptable. So however those words might need to fit into the title.
It's going to be about a 9-word letter.
I don't know, but it comes down to
It's the puzzle here.
tightly
No more
coupled
than 3.
educational with economic, social, and workforce needs.
We're trying to figure out how it can be carrot and stick.
Carrot and stick.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
But I think the first line, Mark, that you had under tightly coupled was really critical here. And we just wanted to think about, under this vertical, how does it tie to the 8th grade, 10th graders taking some community colleges? Where are they getting the advice?
The council.
The straight line from A to B. We wanted this vertical
How do you get them into
to
the
be
system?
taking current needs with the current environment and reaching that far back. So it wasn't fixing K through 12, but it was
Right.
the late half of the continuum. And post-secondary obviously has a big piece of that. So that was kind of where
Interesting.
we went.
It's going to be critical that we make sure that the word community colleges shows up.
Yes.
So if
everywhere.
we expanded B to include, to reach earlier into the I really don't like the pipeline metaphor, but earlier upstream is to address these issues of career guidance and early credit, then we've got a true talent development system, right?
Like in the European system, there's some airlocks there where kids are kind of exposed very specifically to some pathways, right?
Airlocks.
Well, they are.
If they don't pass,
you don't get to go.
You're locked out.
I'll start talking about
gravity.
No, but about the fact that you just don't get. Yeah, exactly. You don't get to, and for us to pour a bunch of money into 10th grade doesn't necessarily make a whole bunch of sense. But if we also had some pivotal event at 10th grade, or opportunity for kids at 10th grade to be exposed so they know before they get too far what they need to do to be prepared. That's always been the critical piece.
We're out of time almost, so I know you guys are busy. But we have one person asking to provide public comment. Donna Cohen? Just
Thanks, Donna.
recognize yourself, Donna, again, and who you're with. And
I'm just going to pass it up.
Here,
Would you
Mark.
please turn to page 2, the second section. My name is Donna Cohen. I was a technology education teacher for 11 years, including 2 years training teachers in Botswana. I have a master's in vocational education administration, and I have worked for a number of public employment and training programs. So the first thing I just want to show you here is this list of courses that you're looking at, which is a compilation, is what the current technology education or shop teacher learns. Okay? And as you can see, it covers STEM. Okay? So the TE in STEM, technology, engineering, STEM is using engineering to apply the principles of science and math to projects, to real-life projects using technology. The teachers who are trained to do that are technology education teachers, or depending on the program you go through, technology engineering teachers. Same thing though. They're the ones who have the expertise in projects. And they seem to have been left out of this picture. Now I realize that we've lost most of them over the last 30 years, unfortunately. But there are programs in the country, and the first line of defense as far as finding teachers to really make this project-based program come alive are the technology education teachers. We need a program again in Oregon. I went through OSU. I'm going to be meeting with some people about that. I think it's something that needs to be an urgent look. And one approach, I'm sure there are many, would be to couple the community college for the technical portion of it and the four-year colleges that have education degrees with the professional ed. That would be one approach. I have heard, discussion of bringing in people from industry to do the teaching. STEM isn't a vocational program. You bring in somebody from industry, they know this, and the students need to be able to build to that. So that's why you need, that kind of person. I find it kind of interesting that, just two things, that on one hand, Mark, you keep saying, this high-tech stuff and whatever. It's not an either-or for two reasons. One, it's not an either-or in work life, okay? So this is an old school thing, right? I made this 34 years ago at OSU in my first tech ed class there. Metal fabrication, loved it. We had to draw out a pattern, and we used geometry to do that. Now you do it on a computer, you still need geometry. But the thing is this, you would think that none of the tools that I use to make this with would be used today. They are. They're not used in production shops, they're used in custom sheet metal shops where they're making one of things. They use the same tools. So it's not an either-or. The other reason it's not an either-or is if you're talking about, and this is so important, if you are talking about, growing in kids this awareness of STEM, this appreciation for, all these areas, and you're starting at a young age, you're not starting them off with production equipment. You're starting them off with basic tools. And they will continue to need that. When they're building their projects, they will use some production equipment.
We're sorry, your conference is ending now. Please hang up.
Some tools and hammers, anyhow. And if you talk to John Niebergall, he will say the same thing. Lastly, I don't know why people, one of the things employers seem to say they need most is creativity and problem-solving ability. Okay? And we look at, say, art classes, or we're looking at other classes in school and saying, that's where kids are creative. We need to encourage that. Well, a kid can be super creative in a STEM, on a STEM project, working with a wood lathe or working with a production, all those tools, they can be incredibly creative and solve problems and learn a great deal, and we just move them up through the stages, and then they find their interest in STEM by that process. I mean, I feel like we're not thinking of the kids and how they think and grow. And that's why the people who should be teaching them also need to be teachers. So I hope you'll look at some of the other stuff I have here and,
Well, thank you.
one other thing, really, I think it's, I use the term disgraceful in here, and I think it's probably appropriate. There are no teachers in here except for you, Mom. And I can see by the discussion that there are points at which you need that perspective. I mean, you're talking about developing an education program, and you don't have educators here? You don't have a science teacher, a math teacher, and a tech ed teacher? That is wrong. Thank you.
Interesting perspective.
What is the status on voc ed? Any university in the state still offering this program?
I'm not sure it's an endorsement anymore, is it?
That's-
At all?
No, that's
a-
the thing. Okay,
it's-
vocational education is training for a career. So it used to be in high school, you could take, and at Benson you can do some of that. You study for a career, you are taught by somebody who's really from industry. That's where they started, and then they got teaching credentials. Okay, technology education, the focus is on the teaching and on the variety of tools and equipment and techniques.
Understood. That's, I guess, restate the question. Is there anybody offering a technology endorsement?
That is the question. There isn't in Oregon anymore. There are in other states, and what we need to see is that happen in Oregon. We need to bring back a technology endorsement. And Concordia is looking at doing some training for the teachers in PPS, but I don't believe they're looking yet at technology, and we need to include that.
Thank you.
Yeah, but they don't have the technology.
I don't think it's part of our licensing either anymore. It's, yeah.
That's why I put
It's-
my license
yeah.
there.
Yeah,
There's a
it's no
there's a subtle
longer,
distinction.
they combined, and just wrote general licensing, right, without the separate endorsement. So thank you all.
So next
for the input.
steps, yeah.
I will try to re-aggregate the additional information, and just Donna, to your point, I'm working closely with the Department of Education and educators throughout the system to garner feedback on these strategies as well, so.
You might have to repeat that.
That's all right. I just want you all to know.
Yeah.
More importantly.
And we do have an advisory council. We do have an advisory council to look at that.
And we'll need to formalize that as one of our next steps here. Chair, I propose that we do not have a July meeting, formal meeting.
Let's just not at this point. Let's see how it goes, and if we feel
Okay.
like we need to get together, we'll see if we can either do it by
Okay.
phone or something like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for this work. It sounds like
Thank
at
you
least
all.
we're going the right direction. Obviously, we got to.
Well, it's good to get some specifics on
right.
paper,
Right,
so
right.
we can all start pounding on a straw man.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll be
Thank you all
coming
for
to
your
folks for
input.
data.
Thank you, Mark, for the work on
Thank you.
this. Thank you.